Man, we are in the middle of a stretch of just incredible weather. It's about 78, 80 degrees, sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, shaping up to be just a spectacular weather weekend. Hope you have something fun planned. Maybe head on over to the Ute game. We're going to be giving away some Smith's Tailgate passes on the show today. The Smith's Tailgate Pass it's the best tailgate that they have up there. It's right next to ours, and we do a great job. Ours is like Smith's is like on steroids. It's really big. They've got a big stage, a bunch of food, a bunch of music, a bunch of drinks. So we're out and about today. We'll hook you up with some passes if you're looking for something to do Saturday night prior to the Utah football game. Of course, we'll talk a lot of Utes on the show today. We'll talk a lot of Utah football today to get you ready for the Arizona game tomorrow. Big one for BYU too. We'll get to some of that. As of right now, Utah is a 12.5 favorite. That's up about 2.5 points from when you and I last spoke yesterday. AccuWeather game time weather is about 72 degrees and sunny at kickoff at 8:15. It's going to be an epic night, man. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll get to some of that on the show today. We have some really good college football guests to talk to. Can BYU prove that their start is for real? What does that look like tomorrow against Baylor, where they are a 3-point underdog in Waco, over under 46.5. It is brunch in Waco for BYU fans, as that kick will be 10 a.m. Read some things today that they're expecting about 8,000 to 10,000 BYU fans down in Waco. BYU fans always tend to show well and travel well, so big games for both these two schools coming up tomorrow. Utah State's on a bye before they travel to Boise, so we'll kind of put that to bed. Of course, the Pac-12 storylines continue. And the Mountain West Conference storylines continue. ESPN Daily did a good podcast today that I would send you to try to help us understand how this happened and what could come next. So a lot of college football top of mind today. The Dallas Cowboys survived, but just barely. It got hairy. I mean, I thought Dallas was going to go into New York and hand the Giants a pretty easy victory for Dallas. But for the 13th straight time, Dak Prescott beats the New York Giants, and the Cowboys are now 2-2, and they've won 2 road games. So we have a really cool slate of Week 4 games in pro football that we'll get to on the show today. Unfortunately, as it feels like every single week these days, the news cycle prior to the pro football weekend is really all about injuries. A lot of players are going to be sitting out. We'll give you the up-to-date situation so you guys can make sure your fantasy football teams are all dialed in before the weekend. So a lot of football on the show. Some other things certainly going on. The President's Cup, day 2 of the President's Cup up in Montreal. The Internationals made a great comeback after the U.S. won all 5 of the matches yesterday. We're going to do a little golf on the show today because the President's Cup is here. Tony Finau was playing with Wyndham Clark, and last I checked, they weren't doing well. Also, RSL back in action on the road at Austin FC. RSL in their battle to capture a top 4 playoff seed in order to have a home playoff game continues. Some injury issues we'll get to, and we'll talk a little RSL on the program today to get you ready for a busy soccer weekend in college and pro football, in soccer, and in golf. Now, there's a little Jazz news today. Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck, Ryan Smith addressing the media down at the Zions Bank Basketball Center. The message is already being furthered that this is a very young team, and Zanuck himself today, Justin he gets it, man. He's a guy over there that really gets it, and talked about how, the only way for young players to get experience is to find playing time. And if you translate that message, combined with the news today that Will Hardy had the 5th year of his contract picked up, and by the way, it was the 5th year, not the 4th year. So this is his 3rd year. They had already picked up his option for next year. And if you connect the dots, Will probably looked at his roster and said, 7 of my top 9 or 10 rotational players are under 23. I'm going to need a couple years to figure this out, guys. And so they gave it to him, gave him his 5th option. I think we're going to see a lot of the young players playing for the Utah Jazz this year. All right, good guest list on this Friday afternoon. But before we get to that, I want to tell you where we're at today. We're at the Smiths on 9th and 9th, really defined, very centrally located. Come on by and get everything ready for your tailgate or your backyard party as Arizona's in town. So it's our Smiths Football Fridays. We'd love to see you here at the Smiths 9th and 9th. We are outside. We are set up right by the parking lot. So come on in and say hello just for stopping by. We're going to give away 2 tailgate passes to each person who stops by while supplies last. Looks like we have a total of 10. So the first 5 people that stop by today at Smith's, we'll hook you up with these tailgate passes for the Smith's Tailgate, which is right on the corner of Guardsman. It has everything you need, food, drink, music. It's a lot of fun right next to our tailgate, so you can come say what's up to us. We'll be over there. So we're over here at the Smiths, 9th and 9th. Come on by and say hi. All right, our first guest today, Brian Dunseth, will preview the weekend ahead for RSL. Then we're going to bring in Max Brown, one of my favorites, to talk college football with. We'll look back on what's happened with both Utah, BYU, big picture, Big 12, national college football landscape. Eyes of the college football world are on Tuscaloosa this weekend as it's Georgia and Bama. Alabama, a home dog for the first time since 2007. So we'll get Max on that today, do a little golf with our buddy Paul Pugmire, talk a little President's Cup. And then my guy, Chris Comrade from The Athletic, has been killing it on the college football beat this year, is going to stop by for an entire hour beginning at 4 o'clock here on this Friday afternoon. So Brian Dunseth, Max Brown, Paul Pugmire, Chris Comrade, me, Spence Checketts, live at the Smiths Football Friday. Smiths on 9th and 9th. And Porter Larson producing the show. All right, it did get a little dicey last night because if your Cowboys lost, we'd have to have a conversation today.
Well, if you tuned back into the show yesterday, I kind of wanted to have that conversation. So now we're at a point where Mike McCarthy got just enough to get over the finish line, and you know, we'll probably do that all season long, and we'll get to maybe 10 wins or so, and then we'll lose in the first or second round of the playoffs, and we'll do this again next year, Spence. I'm loving it. Okay.
Porter Larson, Dallas Cowboy fan, here on the show. All right, Dunny will stop by right out of the gates, but before we get to Brian Dunseth, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends too, at Standard Restaurant Supply, your home for all your tailgating needs. On a Friday afternoon, it's time now for your opening tip. So we look ahead to a very, very busy weekend in college football, and we'll start on the local side of things, and we'll kind of pan out a little bit and talk about some of the big national matchups as we get into, now we're basically a third of the way through the college football season. As we get into, kind of this week throughout the course of the next couple of weeks, we have to move from, observation to conclusion. And maybe that's what we start to do this week, because if we hone in on the local storylines first, okay, so we'll start with Utah, Arizona, and the line's moving, and I'm the one who talked about, prior to the OK State game, with that line moving massively, about 4.5 points over 2 hours. Did somebody have intel that Cameron wasn't playing? I couldn't corroborate it, but sure enough, the offense runs out in Stillwater for their very first series, and Isaac Wilson's under center. So is the the herky-jerky nature of this line indicating one thing or the other? It's hard to say. It hasn't moved as rapidly as it did. It's settled right now at 9.5. It peaked at 12.5, and now it's Utah minus 9.5. That's as of today, Friday afternoon. Your over-under is 47.5, and I bring up the line because I do think you can learn lessons with people in Vegas who seem to know what they're doing. And I guess I'll repeat today what I've said all week. I'm operating off the assumption that it's Isaac until it's not. And I don't have any inside information about who it is or who it is not or where Cameron is or is Isaac going to be the guy for sure. I'm just operating off the premise that it will be Isaac Wilson. And so, does that explain the line being a little bit chaotic? Maybe. We'll have to see. Prior to kickoff tomorrow, 8:15 Mountain Time, and the AccuWeather is 72 degrees at kick. So it should be a really, really fun night. Come check out the tailgate, our ESPN 700 tailgate. Get there early, and have a good time. So I said this yesterday. I'm going to repeat it. I don't really approach this game with a ton of anxiety about, what Utah may be up against. And I respect Arizona's skill position players. We've talked about this. Once they lost their head coach, I think most everybody, including myself, figured Noah Fafita and Tatori McMillan were gone. They were heading up to UW, and they weren't going to be around. It's one of the best quarterback, wide receiver duos in the country. But beyond their skill position players, what they've shown so far is an inability to keep up with a team that just wants to be physical. And I can't shake watching that K-State-Arizona game where Kansas State just bullied them. They just pushed them around the field. It wasn't just a 31-7 shellacking. I mean, it was just a dominating night on the ground for K-State when they went for 235. And if we operate 235 on the ground, Avery Johnson had 110 himself. And, Fafita threw it 42 times, but didn't pass for a touchdown, only had one pick. I mean, they didn't move the ball all that well on K-State, and they got gashed on the ground. And if it's Isaac under center, we all know that that's what it's going to look like. I mean, it's funny that we've talked so much about whether or not Utah football, we were told it was Mekhi Bernard as the top back on the depth chart. We've all seen Mekhi Bernard play multiple positions, including defensive back, at the University of Utah. But it felt like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, it felt like there was this hesitancy to say, okay, you're telling us Mekhi's number one, but is he a number one back? And certainly, I think a lot of people, I certainly did, thought we'd see more Jalen Glover. That continues to be kind of a puzzling situation. Jalen Glover's had big games and big moments for Utah football at the running back position for more than a year now, 3 years. And a lot of buzz about Mike Mitchell, right? Dejon Stanley has the big week one, and suddenly it's like, okay, well, what is this going to look like when it appears you have 4 or 5 backs? Well, maybe they only have one. I mean, they have plenty, but maybe there is the guy at the top who has been there all along. We just need to open our eyes a little bit. So if it's Isaac, I think the game plan is going to look a lot like it did last week in Stillwater, which includes a heavy dose of Mekhi Bernard, establish the run, and then let Isaac cook a little bit, because I think Isaac has earned the benefit of the doubt from all of us for a little bit now. The SUU game didn't look good. We were all there. We all saw it. And when he got some action against Baylor, it was a little bit better, but not great. And then he goes up to Utah State, a big road win in Logan, gets some confidence. And this kid has to be feeling great after going into Stillwater and winning in a place where nobody wins. Mike Gundy does not lose at home. So, establish the run, let Mekhi do his thing, and then we'll see if Andy actually even lets Isaac go a little bit more. And again, I'm operating off the premise that it's Isaac Wilson. I don't have any information. I would breathe a big sigh of relief along with the rest of the community if number 7 ran out after Utah, received the kick or had their first offensive possession. But are you guys confident that you're going to see Cameron? Ask yourself. And as I said, after the Baylor game, I do believe that if Utah football is going to win the Big 12, they probably are going to have Cameron most of the year. I also believe that whether it's tomorrow or throughout the course of the rest of the season, you're probably going to have to lean on Isaac again, just because the data we have. We all want Cam to stay healthy, but it is what it is at this point. And I don't know that you can rewire the kid's brain to try to play differently just to, keep him upright. I think that was the message, and it lasted a game and a half. All right, quick thought on BYU. So, as I said, I think this was Monday. One of the great things about what Kyle has built with Utah is, in my opinion, they become a benefit of the doubt program. Because in college football, oftentimes it seems like you're judged on who you've been and the brand that you are, as opposed to what you have coming back. I mean, there's so much changeover. Like every year, everyone says Notre Dame's awesome. More often than not, they're not. Same with USC. We get brand bias in college football in a way that we just don't in the NFL because things change so rapidly. And Kyle has built a program that is kind of a benefit of the doubt program where you know what you have. And so I don't really have a ton of questions about Utah as it pertains to their place in the conference. They're at the top, if not the best team, certainly one of the 2 or 3. I think it's clear that they're number 1 at this point, and then there's a gap. And after the gap, could it be Brigham Young? Maybe, right? I don't know. But that's why BYU Baylor tomorrow is a little more interesting to me, because I know what Utah is. I'm pretty confident that Utah will cover the spread tomorrow against Arizona, whether it's Isaac or Cam. I think we're going to see a dominant defense. I think we're going to see a great run game. Like, where have you heard this before? That's what it is. We know the deal. And with BYU, do we really know the deal? And I'm not trying to take anything away from their 4-0 start. I said that road win at SMU was much bigger than most people were making it out to be, because if they didn't stay clean in the non-con, they were going to have to find at least 4 conference wins to go bowling. As a result of them winning all 3, they could interconference play with some confidence, and confidence that their 3-0 this year was different than the 3-0 last year, and so far they've been right, okay? So you can talk about SMU, not taking advantage of opportunities and BYU getting a little fortunate there. It's a road win against a P4 team. You can talk about K-State shooting themselves in the foot, which they did. I mean, we have to call it how it is, and we can talk about BYU being very opportunistic when massive mistakes were made, which they were. But the coaches all week, don't take my word for it. Listen to Kalani, listen to Jay Hill, listen to A-Rod, listen to Kelly Papinga. Like, that game left them wanting more from just like the meat and potatoes of your football program. You can't rely on 3 turnovers and chaotic special teams touchdowns week in and week out. K-State went for 228 on the ground. That's not good enough. Baylor is going to run the football. I mean, I wasn't very impressed at the Baylor offense when they were here just a couple of weeks ago, which makes me believe BYU goes down to Waco and wins the game and covers the spread, obviously. We'll give you our picks before we sign off at 6 o'clock tonight. BYU is a 3-point underdog at this point. Over-under is 46.5. But you go to Waco, you make a statement, you impress people a little bit more without the frills and the bells and the whistles, and you just go beat Baylor and you do it soundly. The conversation about BYU next week will be different. All right, live today, Smith's Football Fridays. Smith's on 9th and 9th, really easy to find. We're right out front, giving away tailgate passes to the Smith's tailgate up on Guardsman. Do a great job. When Alex Smith was honored, he actually took the stage in that tailgate lot. Bill, Scott, and Sly do some pregame stuff there. We're right next door, and we've got 5 pair of tickets. So it's just first come, first serve. Come on by, say what's up. We'd love to meet you, shake your hand. Also, we have some FanX tickets for today and tomorrow. And then Smith's is your home for everything you need for the tailgate or your backyard party as Arizona's in town. They've got fresh meat. They've got cheese. Seafood department, rotisserie chicken, fresh-made products at the bakery, drinks, waters, bags of ice. It's all here. First listeners that stop by, 2 tickets to the Smith tailgate for tomorrow's game while they last. All right, we'll get back to some college football with Max Brown, but coming up on the other side, it's Brian Dunseth. So keep it right here. Happy Friday to you on ESPN 700. All right, we are live today out at Smith's. It's our Smith's Football Fridays. We're at the Smith's on 9th and 9th. Come on by and say hi. We've got tailgate passes for the Utah football game coming up tomorrow. Arizona's in town. We've got a nice Modelo cooler. Now, it's empty, but it is branded as Modelo. But there's no ice inside the cooler. There are no Modelos inside the cooler. Our next guest, I think if there were Modelos inside, Dunny, I could have convinced you to come down to Smith's.
I was right around the corner. I mean, I almost turned around, and once you said you had a cooler, Modelo cooler, but yeah, now I'm proud I made the right decision by getting on the freeway.
No, that's smart. No, and that's my favorite thing about you. You make good decisions, Dunny. So I've always appreciated that about you, buddy. All right. So I asked Jason, I asked Kurt, I asked Pablo a question that I haven't asked you because it's been a little bit. The question generally is this, Dunny, like, did you give up the potential for something special right now to make a little cash and then play the long game? And look, if that's the deal, that's the deal, right? There's so many different ways to do this. I'm not even judging, but what do you think about the decision-making process that certainly brought in a lot of good young talent that may pay off in the long run, but did they sacrifice the opportunity to make a run this year?
Absolutely not. I think the outlier in this conversation was the goals and assists that Andres Gomez put up. And I don't know if he's ever going to be more valuable, to be truthful and transparent, than he is right now. And I hope he has an incredible career over at Red and internationally for Columbia. But I can remember a time in which Ned Grabavoy had like 8 goals and 12 assists. And that was the one year that, he topped out. I think Dominic Marchuk is going to be as important for Real Salt Lake over the next couple of years and, quite honestly, have a more immediate impact than what Andres Gomez did. Because remember, Andres for that first year really struggled to adapt. Dominic Marchuk looks like he's been a part of this club for 18 months, not a month and a half. The problem isn't losing Andres Gomez. The problem is that Chicho Arango, since that game in Portland and the subsequent suspension, has been nowhere close statistically to the player that he was. And then the bare honest truth is that they've got 2 number 2 goalkeepers, neither of which want to become the number 1 goalkeeper, based on performances, errors, and inability to hold on to the starting position.
All right, I'm glad you brought up the keepers because for our listeners, my man's a center back, so he's about to get sensitive. I've learned, Brian, through people like you and Jason and Pablo, that when it comes to certain goals allowed, you cannot just crack on the keeper, and you can't just crack on the back line. And Pablo often talks about defending as a group, and so I get all that. But, dude, what is it, like 9 goals conceded in 3 games and 2 keepers that look really skittish? I mean, I don't – and I asked Kurt prior to the window opening, are you looking for a keeper? And he said, no, we like what we have. But to your point, neither of those 2 have taken advantage of the opportunity to make the job theirs. And there have been some rough moments from Jay Glad and Philip Quinton. So as a former center back – and I always feel bad that you guys are punished so punitively because goals change everything. What do you most attribute to what I perceive to be a really leaky defense with only 4 matches left?
Well, you're right. It is a group effort. But I would actually dumb it down, Spence. Listen, goalkeepers to make the saves or don't make the saves based on the shots that they're facing. And I would agree with you. In moments, Real Salt Lake is giving up way too many shots. That being said, the shots that they're giving up aren't worldies. I mean, these are savable goals. And, I mean, listen, I go back to the days of Nick Raimondo. And if Nick Raimondo, one of the best goalkeepers, if not the best goalkeeper historically in Major League Soccer, would give up a goal that compromised his team that he felt that he could have stopped, you would have been able to tell by his body language. You would have been able to tell by his facial expressions. And the moment that he retired, it opened up the door for David Ochoa. You saw Zach McMath come down from Vancouver, where he's a backup goalkeeper, and he was supposed to be kind of the conduit of short-term success, but the long game being Ochoa. Ochoa takes him to the Western Conference Finals. The next year, ownership change. Some things go sideways. He's been sent off. He's now currently, I don't know if you know this, the backup goalkeeper to Hugo Lloris at LAFC. So he's going to be the heir apparent goalkeeper once Lloris is gone at LAFC. I think they've tried to bide their time, understanding that Gavin Beavers' upside is extraordinary. But I would say that the weakest position on this team has been goalkeeper, and it has been goalkeeper for the past couple of seasons. Even so much so is that I thought that either Maxime Crepeau or John McCarthy, who were both going to be moved on from LAFC, were absolutely the right goalkeepers to take a run out. So that's just my humble opinion. I don't do the numbers. I don't make the decisions. But I'll double down in saying that for whatever hope Real Salt Lake has in these Western Conference playoffs and the identity of trying to lift an MLS Cup trophy, it'll be determined by goalkeeping. And right now, goalkeeping is the weakest facet in terms of consistency of what we've seen from Real Salt Lake for the better part of the last 5 months.
Hugo Lloris reference. Come on, you Spurs. Thank you, Donnie. Is there a match this weekend that you and I need to discuss real quick, non sequitur?
Are we going to do hot sauce? Are we going to do the loser?
Well, we did it. We did it. We did it. And for once in a generation, my Spurs beat your proud Man U, and you never paid up. So is it a double or nothing situation this weekend, or what?
Either way, let's do it this way. Next time, I'll come into the studio and we'll do it live on air. We'll see how you handle it.
Love it. Love it. Okay, fair enough. That still feels like a bet I lose, even though I won. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so one more keeper question for you, okay? And then I've got a lot that I need to get from you today before I set you loose in a few minutes. So it's go time. Do you go with the vet? Do you go with the guy who has the experience? Do you go with the guy who appears to be a little bit more of a front-facing communicator because he's older? Or do you go with the youngster because you like the upside? Like, at this point, Dunny, they've got to pick a lane, yeah?
Yeah, unfortunately, you have to pick a lane, but I don't think it's necessarily the present versus the future. I think it's just based on this last week. And in these last weeks, what you've seen with the goals that have been given up. Listen, this is Gavin Beavers' position to lose, and I think he lost it again. And I think, quite honestly, this is going to be, the fifth time there's been a back and forth between it's your job, it's his job. It's your job, it's his job. Now it's back to your job. So I just think from a psychological perspective, Gavin hasn't been through this, and you have to be patient, and you have to understand young goalkeepers are going to make some silly mistakes. So I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't. If tomorrow night down in Austin when Max Bretos, Theo Max, and I get the starting 11, that Zach McMath is back between the posts.
Had Max on yesterday. What a delightful guy, man. You guys do a great job. So excited to have you on the call. All right, we got to talk Chicho because, I don't know. And Max obviously being, with his L.A. gig, so he has an understanding of Chicho, the person, in a way that I don't. I guess mercurial strikers are pretty commonplace. We've had him here with Sabo and Yura. And when that suspension went down, yes, the best example, thank you, sir. When the suspension went down, man, I talked to guys over there, and, there's just this concern, like, could this be the thing that spoils a special season for both the player and the club? And you can't spin it any other way than he hasn't looked the same since. If they're going to do anything special, it's going to be on Nine's back. It just is. So your thoughts on all that, where we stand right now with Chicho?
Yeah, I thought the length of the suspension was ridiculous. The fact of the matter that you took him out of the All-Star game, you took away from the starting 11, and you took him away from potentially being the captain of the All-Star team. It has certainly affected him, as have injuries and suspensions, multiple suspensions, the yellow card warning situation, as well as the injury that he picked up on the backside. We thought that it would be Diogo underneath Chicho, and this team would jump to another level. And at times it has shown what it's certainly capable of doing, and at other times we haven't seen nearly. The goal that he forced Sviatchenko into an own goal at Houston shows how dangerous he is. That ball he hit off the half skip and the up bounce against Portland Timbers was inches wide. And I would suggest that he's still the same Chicho. He just needs that goal. Because I think it's been like maybe 3 of the last 9 games he's been able to take a part of. And that's just devastating. So this was at a time where he was, 17 goals, 13 assists, out to break Sabo's record for single season goal scoring record. So I'm of the personal belief he just needs to get 1. And if he gets 1, I think the weight of the pressure of being alleviates. Because I think he's been stretching a little bit to get back into the form that he was in.
How much, and this was Max's point yesterday, how much of Chicho's dip in production is because Andres is not out there, giving him service, providing opportunities, taking pressure off of him? How much of that is there?
I don't, if I say 0, it's probably not correct. Because I do think there was a freestyling characteristic to the way that those two players played within the team concept. Because there was still structure, but I think Pablo also understood there was a connectivity, an intuition between those two players. And they made each other better. And I do think that's part of the equation. But Chicho's good enough to play in so many different versions of that position that I think it's more about finding his rhythm and his fitness and his sharpness again, as opposed to just laying it at the feet of Andres Gomez's departure.
All right, now let's move over into the space of how they're trying to replace not just the production of Andres Gomez, but simply that position. And kids, let's learn a little soccer term on a Friday. It's called like for like, right? So, Dunny, this is not like for like soccer knowledge everywhere because the players they're asking to fill in for Andres don't play like him, right? So give me your opinion on how the progress is going to try to replace what Andres brought out on the wing.
I think Lachlan Brooks showed industry of getting up and down and showed a level of commitment on both sides of the ball that that Andres had a little bit more freedom from, if that makes sense, because he was so good in the attacking phase of play and scoring so many goals that there was less of a structure for him to defend as much. And I also think, listen, you've gone through 4 right backs, right? You've gone through Brody, you've gone through Bodie, you've gone through Quentin, and you've gone through Javane Brown. So I think that's another part of this conversation in terms of, and Vera picking up injuries and suspensions. So there's a defensive component to this too. But I really, really, really like Dominic Marchuk. I love the way he gets back and he gives you the hustle. He's got the final product. And I think in these last 2 appearances, he's certainly shown what he's capable. Now, I'm not trying to get out over my skis, but the potential is there to be as effective as Andres, but more of an immediate effectiveness as opposed to the 18 months that it took for Andres to be in the form he was to be sold over to Red.
So we've seen really bright moments from Diogo for sure. I mean, you can see what Kurt and Jason and everybody saw in him, and you can see why they wrote the check to bring him over. It's still early, so there's a lot of observation, not conclusion going on. But like I said, 4 matches left, and it's playoff time, so there's not a ton of time to be messing around. What have you seen so far that stands out most? 5 games played, 3 starts, and that goal when you watch Diogo, and how do you see the kind of the interchange synergy between he and Chicho working out so far?
Well, so this one will hit home for a Manchester United fan because he was at Copenhagen when they beat Manchester United and had incredible performances not only against Manchester United but against Bayern Munich as well. And previous to going to Copenhagen, he was at Benfica and played against Arsenal in Europe as well. So I've seen what Diogo is capable of doing at a higher level than Major League Soccer. Not surprised. I think he's continuing to adapt both on and off the field. I think the guys have taken him in immediately and recognized what a player he is. And I think that even though statistically Matt Crooks hasn't been putting up crazy numbers, there's a work ethic that goes unnoticed in the system. And they're 2 completely different players. But you also have to make sure that the system and the structure matches the players on the field, right? So I think the biggest – well, I don't know how to say this correctly. not that I think there was a mistake made in the timing of not getting Diogo into market in a similar way that they got Chicho into market, meaning that 2.5 weeks before Chicho was even available to be registered, he was already training with the team. Whatever the delay was to get Diogo here, I think was a mistake because you missed out on the better part of it, probably about 6 to 7 games, where that would have had him in his prime form and understanding what's necessary at this stage of the season. So I could see him starting tomorrow. I would also remind people that it's a 3-game window once again ahead of the international break. So if he doesn't start this week in Austin, I would assume that he starts the next 2 matches for RSL.
I want to ask you about Anderson Julio, who I think deserves, as the kids would say, Dunny, deserves his flowers this year. I think he deserves a lot of credit for, because, I was told his best friend on the team was Andres Gomez, and so you lose your buddy. You know what that's like. He played for different clubs, and sometimes he's coming off the bench with Chicho stuff. He's had to start. And I never thought Anderson Julio could be a double-digit goal scorer in Major League Soccer. He gets one more. He's at 10, which is pretty impressive. So what's your take on what we've seen from Anderson as both the player and just kind of the teammate through these turbulent few weeks or so?
Yeah, listen, I think when you lose somebody that you hang out with off the field for you and your wife or your partner, it stings. But it shouldn't affect your performance on the field because you're a professional athlete. For Anderson, if you look at his goals per minute ratio, he's actually extremely high in Major League Soccer. But the reality is that because he has a certain profile and a certain proficiency for stretching back lines, he's looked at more so as an impact player off the bench. And historically, he hasn't really lasted physically past the 75th minute mark. If you go back and you look at his records, I would probably be a betting man and say he hasn't had a full 10 games of 90-minute performances underneath his belt since he's been here. So knowing that Chicho is available, he's always going to start. You can always double up he and Chicho. And now with Crooks and Diogo and Luna, you have multiple options. So either way, I think he has been much more effective than previous years with the minutes that he's had on the field, whether that's from a starting slot or coming off the bench.
All right, I want to get a preview with the Austin match coming up. But before we do that, one more question here. As you're putting together, your board for the call, and you're doing the 11 for RSL, which is, if you had to pick one spot where there's the most competition, which spot is it and why?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right back, maybe?
I'm going through it.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that would want to say that Nelson Palacio, playing in that central part of the midfield with Emeka Eneli and Brian Ojeda, I don't think Nelson gets enough credit because I think he's a really good player. But the problem is the consistency between Ojeda and Eneli has been extraordinary this year. I would say probably the number 10 position because Crooks, Diogo, and I would throw Diego Luna into that conversation, all can be incredibly effective if given the keys to the Ferrari, but in completely different ways. They're 3 completely different players. Right now, the 2 challenging positions are right back and goalkeeper. I would say that's the toughest to choose from because maybe they are the most competitive without either position having a clear-cut breakthrough.
All right, let's move over to Austin. That's the next opponent. Really cool city, really cool venue. Was there a couple years ago when Austin actually beat RSL in the playoffs. It was a heart-wrenching loss. Josh Wolf has phenomenal hair. He's also a good friend of yours. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've been smashing Austin tape all year, Dunny, but I will say when I was down there for that match where they got RSL pretty good after a dream start, I was really impressed with their form. From my vantage point, it looked like they had a lot of talent. So why hasn't it worked out for your buddy this year, and what's RSL up against as they travel down to Austin coming up on Saturday?
Yeah, there's a couple things here. Number one, I think we have to acknowledge Claudio Reyna Gio Reyna's dad was the general manager. And after the World Cup in 2022, he was let go from his position as general manager at Austin FC. There was a lot of heavy contracts that club was carrying for players that weren't nearly good enough that were signed from Claudio. Rodolfo Varela, who was an assistant coach for Pep Guardiola, has taken over the sporting director role, a little bit wet and green behind the ears, with understanding the MLS rules and regulations of signing players. I think they missed out on some important players at the beginning of the season. They were quite light heading into the year because they had to get out of some certain contracts. They signed guys like Jader Obrian, Giassi Zardes, Diego Rubio, guys with MLS experience, to tide them over in some positions. And then signed Osman Bukhari, the Ghanaian international, Mikel Dessler, the right back from Finland, and then Svatko, who was a Ukrainian center back, who finally just got his debut at LAFC the other night. It hasn't matched expectations, but that year you watched them, in my humble opinion, they were better than LAFC. And in that offseason, they ended up losing a couple players that they didn't think they were going to lose, and it threw their project into complete disarray. What I will say is if anybody wants to see what Austin's capable of doing, go watch that LAFC game. They walked out of there with a 1-1 tie, and they probably should have won that game. And they were missing Driussi. So Sebastian Driussi, their number 10, will be their most dynamic player. Rubio is going to really piss every RSL player and RSL fan off because of his manipulation of the game. And then they've got a really strong goalkeeper in Stuver. So they're not going to turn over because their fan base is up in arms with where they're at right now in the Western Conference table.
All right, Dunny, last thing, I'll set you loose on this. We had a cool night for Kyle Beckerman a couple of weeks back since you and I last spoke. He's now a Hall of Famer. He was inducted into the Utah Hall of Fame. You saw firsthand, obviously, how everything changed when he landed here. What's the Brian Dunseth summary on what Kyle Beckerman means to RSL?
Yeah, first off, maybe I can get an invite next time you get the boys together.
All right, well, nice. I'm the wrong guy to talk to about that, as you know.
I'm just saying.
All right.
I was envious and jealous seeing all your Instagram posts.
All right.
Listen, Kyle Beckerman, I'm not sure I'll ever come across another one like him. I met him as a young, precocious teenager coming through the under-17s. I played with him at Miami Fusion when he got his first deal before he spiral fractured his ankle. I watched him become one of the best central midfielders in Major League Soccer in Colorado Rapids. I watched him go from maybe he and Pablo, the most hated duo in Salt Lake City history, from an RSL fan base, to the most beloved duo or a couple of the most beloved duo in the RSL fan base history. The fact that he gave everything every single time he stepped on the field for Claret and Cobalt, his innate desire to win is something that I don't think he'll ever get enough credit for, because it was every day in training that he rose the level of everybody around him, and he held himself at such a high standard. His technical ability, the way he read the game, the way he would jaw at people, the crunching tackles, he'd take a piece out of you. He was an MFer. Nobody wanted to play against him. And I to this day, I talk to my boys about Kyle, of the guy, like, you want to mimic somebody who took a little and turned it into a lot. That's Kyle Beckerman. To be a World Cup veteran, to be, in my humble opinion, no disrespect, the most iconic RSL player in history. I'm happy to see he and his family be rewarded with the recognition that he so rightfully deserves.
Well said. And after I let you go, I'm going to send you my location, and wherever I'm at, you're invited. Just roll up. You don't have to tell me. I'm just going to share my location. Just show up. Be like, hey, because you're always invited when I'm involved in the situation.
Yeah, it'll be like, oh, Dunny, what are you doing here?
All right, brother. Have a great call tomorrow, man. Good chatting with you.
Appreciate you.
All right, Brian Dunseth, former RSL player, now on the broadcast side with Apple TV. He'll be on the call for tomorrow's match against Austin. All right, we're live today at Smith's Football Fridays. Coming up next, Max Brown's going to stop by. Max is great when it comes to previewing some of these matchups. We'll do Utah, Arizona. We'll do BYU, Baylor. We'll get to some Bama and some Georgia. Some great games on the slate. We're going to bring in Paul Pugmire, do a little President's Cup today. Chris Camarati for an hour of college football conversation live on site here at Smith. So it's 9th and 9th. Come on by. We've got 4 more pair of tickets. 3 more pair. So we still have 3 pair of tickets for the Smith's tailgate prior to kickoff for the Ute game tomorrow. They do it's the biggest deal up there. I mean, it's a massive space. When Alex Smith was in town, he took the stage, and Bill and Sly and Scott will be there doing some pregame stuff. Then it's the Ute Walk. So we've got tickets for that tailgate for you guys. Get some food, get some drinks, say what's up. Our ESPN 700 tailgate is right next door. So it's at the Smiths on 9th and 9th. You can't miss us. We are right as you pull in, right outside of the spot. So pull into the parking lot, come by and say hello. We also have FanX tickets for today and tomorrow as well. And obviously, Smith's is your home for everything you need to make sure your tailgate is ready for tomorrow night. I want to tell you about my friends at Big O Tires. You can save $120 on a set of 4 in-stock tires right now. It's their fall sales event. It goes now through October the 13th. 50 locally owned and operated locations in Utah. You can schedule an appointment online. One-stop shop for all of your automotive repair needs, free tire rotations and flat repairs. They've got great financing options. There's no credit needed financing options as well. Big O Tires has over 50 locally owned and operated locations in Utah. You can visit bigotires.com to find a location near you. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Max Brown stops by. Coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Fridays. Do it every Friday right before Utah home games. The Smiths we're at today is on 9th and 9th. Can't miss us. We are right outside of the store. As soon as you pull into the parking lot, we're there giving away a Modelo cooler. Now, there are no Modelos inside, so let's not get weird, but it is a very nice cooler. And we got a couple of more pairs of tickets for the Smiths football tailgate prior to Utah, Arizona. Tomorrow night here in Salt Lake, 8:15 kick time. AccuWeather's 72 degrees and clear. It's going to be a beautiful night. Our next guest, one of our favorites to talk college football with, my buddy Max Brown, back on the show. Max, happy Friday. How you doing, buddy?
Happy Friday, Spence. I'd be looking forward to these segments. It's becoming a little reoccurring cadence to start the college football weekend.
For sure, and always appreciate your time and you stopping by. And I believe we spoke to you a couple of weeks ago, and I asked you this question. I think I asked 10 or 15 college football guests the same. Is there any way Utah State can sneak their way into the Pac-12? And everyone said no. Well, things change, Max, and we'll start with the news and the kind of the chaos between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West Conference. And locally, happy for Utah State if this is what they want to do to join the Pac-12. So give me your thoughts on the latest before we get to some actual games coming up.
Yeah, I was surprised that Utah State snuck their way in there. My first reaction was, why only 2-3 weeks later and not part of that initial batch? And candidly, I haven't read all the nuances there, but I was surprised. I thought Memphis's athletic director and his comments, I believe it was yesterday, were pretty candid. And basically, he was like, in so many words, is basically it was a lowball offer from the Pac-12, which I don't know what that means, but to me, if I was the Pac-12, those are the types of schools that I'd be going after. The Memphis, the Tulane, even an App State or USF to some degree. It just feels like those are, the best of the available schools without going into maybe the armed forces and whatnot. But happy for Utah State. I think the prospect of the Pac-12 just getting one more team to get to that minimum barrier of 8 looks a lot more promising. And I think when you zoom out and see, I called Oregon State's game week 1, and there was, a lot of people that were, if you were a betting man back then, that would say, hey, Oregon State and Washington State would relegate down to the Mountain West. So the fact that hasn't happened, I think, is a huge win for Oregon State and Washington State. And I think those programs have a lot to be excited about, just given the hand that they were dealt the past 18 months or so.
So last week, Max, Utah goes to Stillwater and wins in a place where not many people do. Mike Gundy doesn't lose there, and that's a tough place to play. We were all, once again, doing the guessing game prior to kick. Who's the quarterback? Who's the quarterback? Who's the quarterback? They run out, and it's Isaac. And he was fine, held himself together. They, of course, relied on the ethos of what Coach Witt wants them to do, which is run the football and play great defense, which they did. It got a little loose late, but it was never really in danger. We'll get to some previews, but before we do, what were your main takeaways of Utah's win in Stillwater over OK State?
Yeah, my main takeaway was like, here we go again in terms of just from a national perspective, because obviously I'm not on the beat like you are with Utah, but here we go again in terms of Utah's top 10 team in the country, 4-0. They went on the back of just a stout run defense. Quarterback play wasn't that pretty necessarily, but gets the job done. And I know, the standard for Utah fans has been Cam Rising the past couple of years, but I always think back to when I was in college, when you're talking 13 to 16, and, Utah had some struggles there a little bit at times finding quarterback play. I remember, the days of, Travis Wilson coming along, but even before that, or if he got banged up, it was a grind there at times for Utah offensively. And here we go again in terms of on the back of your defense. You shut down arguably one of the best running backs in college football completely. An Oklahoma State team that's really good, and it just feels like we'll see what happens tomorrow versus Arizona, because I think this is a potential get-right game for not get-right game, but a response game for Arizona. But it just feels like Utah's waiting in the shadows. No one's really talking about him from a national picture. If they can time it up with Cam Rising maybe getting back at the right time, man, the Utes could go on a run, which I've been on this show many a times over the years where that's been the sentiment.
For sure. And so let's move over to tomorrow night. And I understand your point about Arizona, hoping to get right after they got smoked. But you know this, Max. Kansas State and Utah, they want to do the same thing to you. They want to corner you. They want to bully you. They want to beat you up. And there's a lot to like about Arizona's skill position players. I mean, quarterback, wide receiver, one combo, one of the best in the country. No one's disputing that. But I didn't see anything against K-State that, in my mind, gives me confidence they can handle Utah's big dogs, the physicality. And if it is Isaac, and by the way, I'm just operating off the assumption that it is until it's not. I don't know what else to do at this point. The line has been funky, Max. It started at 11-5. It moved up to 12, and now it's down to 9. So last week, I talked about this on the show because I think it was Thursday night. I signed off at 6 o'clock Mountain Time, and Utah was I can't remember the exact number, but what I remember is the line swung towards Oklahoma State 4.5 points over 2 hours. And so I get on air the next day, I'm like, that means one of two things. Cam's not playing, or a big, wise guy, shark better, put a bunch of cash down to move the line. And it turned out that Cam didn't play. We have a line here that has moved 3.5 points, but it's slowly, incrementally over the week. So I don't know if it means that Cameron's not playing, but I'm operating off the assumption that it is Isaac. Therefore, my best guess, Max, and you'll be good with this, so I'll kind of cede the time to you. Utah's going to play Arizona the way K-State did and the way Utah played OK State last week, and I don't think physically Arizona's ready for that. That's where I'm at with the matchup. What's the Max Brown take?
I'm with you on the physicality standpoint. I'm with you on the Utah taking a similar game plan and identity to Kansas State. To me, the big difference with both those teams is the quarterback play for Kansas State and Utah, respectively. Avery Johnson is one of the more, ascending quarterbacks in college football. I thought he had a really good game versus Arizona in terms of picking up plays with his legs and coming up with just enough to keep the sticks moving. Isaac Wilson, I haven't seen that from Utah. It's not been bad per se, but it's been very just kind of middle of the road. Just keep the boat afloat kind of thing. Versus, I do think Kansas State had a little bit more in that game, but I'm with you. I think, Arizona, and I said this the last time we spoke of, hey, they're top end talent. They're noteworthy guys. They're guys that you're talking about in the open. Those guys are really good. Those guys can hang with anyone in the conference. When you start tapping into their depth in the second half and the front seven defenders that they have, that's where it gets, that's where it gets tough. But I just think with all the proven production that they had coming back, this line, at least what I'm looking at, is 12.5. I might be wrong there. That's a lot of points, especially for a Utah team that I don't think you're going to necessarily score going away type of mentality. I think Utah takes care of business, but from a line standpoint, I think I like Arizona to cover that one.
So you'll take Arizona with the points against Utah?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting, because that line has moved. Trying to keep track of it's been a little bit chaotic. All right. So there's a chance, Max, that we do have 2 top 25 teams in our state. Now it's just kind of the same deal. Like you talk about Utah, Kyle's built more of a benefit of the doubt program where you just know what you get. Year in and year out, you just know what you get. It's been that way for a long, long time. And Kalani's trying to build what Kyle's already built. And I still have questions about BYU that I just don't about Utah. And it's not knocking on them. Like, you have to give them a ton of credit. They go 3-0 last year to start things off. They get in a conference, and it just didn't go well. Now, they still have not won a Big 12 road game. So we'll get to Baylor in a moment. But K-State rolls into Provo last weekend. And it was a perfect combination of great fortune for BYU, and then to credit BYU, them taking advantage of the hand that they had been dealt. So I'm not diminishing the start, but they only had 249 yards of offense, and K-State really kind of gashed them on the ground for the most part. But nonetheless, that's a massive win over a top 15 team in K-State. It's the largest margin of victory for a BYU team when playing a top 15 team. So I'm not diminishing any of it. I just still have questions. But let's start with BYU K-State. What stood out most to you about that win?
Probably the offense, especially given that the offense didn't do much 2 weeks earlier versus SMU. I called the SMU game last week versus TCU, and SMU is a good squad. They're a fully capable offense, and the BYU defense showed up on the road that game. And you mentioned maybe no on the road Big 12 win yet, but that was the on the road ACC win that I thought was impressive. SMU a couple weeks earlier, and to do it 2 weeks later against a top 25 team in a different fashion, that to me is a sign of a great football team when you can win in different ways. I'm with you though. I think there's a lot more to be there's a lot more to see with this BYU squad. But, I know last week when we were talking betting lines and whatnot, that was my favorite line of the week. I picked BYU to cover. I didn't have them winning outright, but they were getting they were double-digit dogs, or maybe 7-point dogs, night game in Provo. Man, I've seen that story before. They took care of business, and the blowing away fashion was a surprise to me, but the fact that BYU was competitive in that game in a tough environment in Provo, not a surprise to me at all. But don't sleep on that SMU win, too. I think SMU is going to sneak up on some people in the ACC.
Yeah, and I'm really coming along to believe that BYU, I'll say today, is a lot better than any of us expected, including myself. Vegas over under 4.5. I picked them to win 6. Media picks them to win, 13th in the Big 12 media poll, and that's clearly, at least as of now, a miscalculation. But let's move over to Baylor. Dave Aranda, who did some coaching in state, clearly is a guy that has some serious questions to answer if he's going to stay employed before the end of the season. And Baylor was here, and their offense, and look, every time an offense rolls into Salt Lake, I'm like, yeah, the offense didn't look great. I'm like, well, yeah, they played against Utah's defense. So Utah's defense did to Baylor what they're going to do to a lot of teams, but I didn't see a whole lot that I was impressed with. BYU, one thing I will tell you, Max, is that defense is for real. Jay Hill's second season, Kalani's the head coach. They bring in some transfers. Some of the players who decided to stay, Tyler Bowdy and others, clearly have put in work. I don't think Baylor's going to be able to move the ball on them. I could be wrong, but it is a brunch in Waco situation, and BYU has lost their last 10-day games to FBS opponents, and they have not won a Big 12 road game. Baylor's getting 3 as of now. Here's the way I'll frame the question. What do you need to see from BYU tomorrow against Baylor to indicate that the questions that you have been answered, and we have to say next week when we're on air, this team is for real?
A good question. Probably more explosion through the passing game or just bigger plays in general. Like, here's what I know about BYU. I know they're going to be a veteran team. Their defense is going to be stout, especially in the run game. They're not. I don't think BYU is going to get out physicaled completely in a game. That I don't worry about. I worry about if it becomes a close game and they're not able to, have the security blanket of staying on schedule and having runs that they can get to. Can their quarterback, can you win on the right arm of your signal caller? And that to me would be the big moment. And especially, when you're playing a team like Baylor, they put up 31 points last week. But even passing yards, like, they want to be explosive. If this game's close at all, I think Baylor would have to unlock a lot more in the passing game. But I just think ultimately for BYU to be in that conversation of, hey, they can ultimately contend for a Big 12 championship or even be in that conversation, I gotta see a full notch more production at the quarterback spot, because ultimately, to be bowl eligible, that's one thing, but to be in the championship classification, you got to have more production at the quarterback spot. That's what I'd be looking for.
K-State hosts OK State, so the two teams that BYU and Utah beat a week ago will meet in Manhattan. Kansas State a 5.5-point favorite. As of now, Oklahoma State is given the second most explosive plays in college football. That defense is not good. And what I've seen from my IMAX, and obviously I'll see to you, is everyone stacking the box, and Ollie Gordon has no space, and whatever quarterback Mike Gundy uses cannot help their running back out. I don't know that I'm as high on them, certainly, as I was to start the season. They are on the road to take on K-State as a dog. How do you see it playing out in Manhattan, Kansas?
I see it being a physical game. Yeah, you talk about two teams that, we're right in the top of the Big 12 conversation, I guess still are. Both have to respond this week to get the trajectory of their program back on track. I just think, again, I go back to Avery Johnson, Kansas State's quarterback. I think his ability on third down, especially when you're behind the sticks, for his legs to be a factor. I don't think Oklahoma, outside of the defense, and that he can take advantage of, I don't think Oklahoma State has enough at the quarterback position to come up with enough big plays to put up points and put up yards. I think Kansas State takes care of business. I'm buying the hype of Avery Johnson. I don't think he's top 5 quarterback in the country right now, but I do think when you look forward to next year and progressing as he's a younger quarterback, I think they have every reason to be excited. But I'm with you. The blueprint on stopping Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma State's running back, is very clear. Stop the box, force Oklahoma State's quarterback, whether it's Alan Bowman or someone else, to beat you on the outside. And even if they do come up with the catch here or there, Deshaun Stribling out wide. Even if that happens, like, I think the mentality for a defense is sweet. You can have one of those, but at the end of the day, when you get in the red zone and you have to go back to Ollie Gordon, we can stop you. And I think that plays right into Kansas State's hands. I think the Wildcats get it done.
So to start the year, we get the Big 12 schedule, and then we start to learn a little bit more about the teams. And it became pretty clear that Utah was a little bit fortunate with the way their schedule laid out. Most metrics have Utah with one of the easier schedules in the Big 12. But a lot of people are saying, okay, Stillwater, that's a really big game, right? And then of course, the rivalry game's always tough. I look at that UCF game, Max. It's the final game of the season for the Utes. It's in Orlando. It's on November the 29th. Utahns love Orlando. There'll be plenty of Ute fans there, I can promise you that. And we have an interesting game in Orlando this weekend as Colorado, who pulled off a miracle to take care of their game against Baylor, will be at UCF. UCF, to me, I mean, obviously a coaching staff with incredible pedigree, but that run game is difficult. I don't think Colorado matches up with them physically. But that's kind of a sneaky game, and I also want your thoughts on what you've seen so far from UCF and if you think they can actually make some noise in the conference.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game. I feel like a bunch of this call we've been talking about styles for teams, and the style of UCF versus Colorado could not be more different. Colorado is very much, I've used the line, they're an air raid team without an air raid playbook. I think they want to pass every down, and they just run when they absolutely have to, it feels like. UCF, on the other hand, totally different story. Their quarterback, KJ Jefferson, he's huge. He's all of 250 pounds plus, it looks like, and they ask him to run, and it's not a vast passing attack. And they're running a bunch, and he has like throws on the outside a little bit, but it's all off of the run game. This UCF defensive line, too, when I called the TCU-SMU game last week, Sonny Dykes, TCU's head coach, was giving a bunch of love to the UCF D-line, saying, hey, we're sleeping on, from a national perspective, we're sleeping on what UCF can bring to the table there. So I like the Knights. I think this is a super interesting matchup. I also love Shadur Sanders' grittiness. I think his toughness, his ability to stand in the pocket. I know he's an easy guy to kind of hate on and whatnot, but the conflicting styles is fascinating to me. And from a Utah lens, when you talk about, hey, what they have coming down the pipeline, that's an interesting question. Like, would you rather have a UCF team that prides themselves on physicality? Well, if you're Utah, great. We pride ourselves on physicality. Bring it. Or there's a team like Colorado that's going to spread the ball around and have weapons on the outside, and if you catch them waking up on the right side of the bed one day and they can put up a bunch of points, does that give you more fear? I don't really know the answer to that. I think Utah can hang with both, but it's a fascinating conversation. And I think a matchup UCF versus Colorado with Utah playing both of them at some point with the remaining games, it's a fascinating identity matchup for Utah.
All right, as you and I have talked about before, I'm always just a little gun-shy and hesitant when folks talk about USC is this, USC is that. I'm not saying they're bad, but more often than not, they're one of the brands that gets the benefit of the doubt, in my opinion. Notre Dame does too. And look, they were at the big house, and Michigan decided to revert back to who Michigan is. And it was a little bit deceiving because Michigan had a bunch of chunk plays on the ground. Defensively, they're better. They just are, and I think they are improved year over year. They're a big favorite against Wisconsin at home. So your thoughts on the Southern Cal loss, and how do you think they bounce back against the Badgers?
My first thought is not even X's and O's or on-field related. I just feel like this USC team is and I'm not in the locker room, obviously, but I listen to all the pressers and obviously stay in the loop with the program. I feel like this is as close-knit of a team as Lincoln Riley, certainly as Lincoln Riley's had, but even in recent memory towards the end of the Clay Helton era. And in today's day and age of college football, where it's a bunch of transfer portals, and usually at USC it's a bunch of big names, which naturally can lead to cliques within the locker room and things of that nature. And I think that's one of the challenges of the USC job, is building a culture and building a true program when you're in a big city and it's transfer portal and it's a bunch of hype and all that. And I give that context because I really get the sense that this USC team is close-knit. I think they respond. I think they walk away from that Michigan game with a chip on their shoulder. I thought Lincoln Riley's line was spot on of, defensively, it felt like they won 85% of the reps, but it was just those handful of chunk run plays that got away from them. Michigan earned those, but it did feel a little bit like, hey, those got away from, like, USC was right there, and it just got away from them a little bit. So I expect USC to respond. I think this is a really good football team. Whether they are great and can get into the elite category, obviously they have work to do. I just felt like a week ago, if you're Michigan, man, that felt like the perfect storm for Michigan. You did just enough offensively. You came up with the big turnovers, things of that nature. You exposed some inexperienced offensive tackles for USC on the road. I expect those tackles to settle in a little bit. I think that's going to be the Achilles heel for USC all season long is the offensive line. But I think what we saw versus Michigan is as bad as it's going to get, and you still had offensive production from the passing attack. So I expect USC to respond. It's a lot of points to cover, but that's a tall task for Wisconsin.
All right, before I set you loose, the eyes of college football will be on Tuscaloosa this weekend, where for the first time since 2007, Bama is a home underdog. You have experience watching Kalen DeBoer coach at a high level and beat other really good coaches like Dan Lanning twice. I know folks down south are still very much in the wait-and-see mode. I don't know, man. Bama as an underdog at home is a line that kind of intrigues me a little bit. Of course, on the other side is Georgia, the number 2 team in the country. How does it go down this weekend? Top 5 matchup down in Tuscaloosa.
I'll stay on the theme of differing styles. I mean, I feel like the average college football fan kind of groups Alabama and Georgia stylistically in the same bucket. Offensively, they're completely different. Alabama wants to be more wide open, use the explosiveness of Jalen Milroe, both with his legs and the vertical passing game. And Georgia, much more conservative. Both these quarterbacks are going to be in NFL conversations this offseason. A lot of people have Carson Beck, Georgia's quarterback, as the top quarterback. I'm not there yet. I don't think he's asked to do nearly as much as some of the other quarterbacks towards the top of the draft. But Georgia's very much let's run it, let's play action. And that Kentucky game a couple weeks ago, Kentucky had the right run game, defensive game plan that totally stopped that Georgia offense. And I don't think Georgia has the ability to adapt and really get into a game plan in the 30 and 40-point category. Versus Alabama, that's where I think they want to be. They want to use that explosiveness. So big plays in the Alabama offense starts becoming a thing. I like the Tide's chances. If it becomes a grimy game, a punch-in-the-mouth kind of game, that's what Georgia wants. Then I like Georgia's chances. But it wouldn't surprise me if when NFL draft season rolls around, if we circle back to this game and this Saturday as a big talking point, not only for Carson Beck, if they get it done and he shows up with some big-time throws, that'll be a talking point. If Milroe, he balls out in this game, this could be the game we point to of, hey, we turned the page, and rather than Jalen Milroe just being a good college quarterback, he balls out on Saturday. I think the conversation of him potentially being an NFL prospect could come about.
Max, thanks, my friend. I appreciate it. Will be a great weekend of college football, and we'll get you back on again soon. Thanks for the time, buddy.
It'll be fun. Thanks for having me.
All right, Max Brown. He's the lead college football analyst over the CW. He was with the Pac-12 Network for a number of years, and that's how we got to know Max. And he's a really good kid, really good college quarterback back in his day. Releases a lot of college football content. If you're a TikToker, I'm not. If you are, he's on TikTok. He is on Twitter, Instagram, at MaxBrown4 is where you find him. All right, we're live today. It is Smith's Football Fridays. We are often want to do this on a Friday afternoon before a Utah home game tomorrow, Arizona in town. We're at the Smiths on 9th and 9th. Now, we don't have any more tailgate passes. Those were snatched up quick like I thought they would be. We are giving away a very nice cooler. It is a Modelo cooler. Now, don't get excited. There are no Modelos inside. It's just a nice branded Modelo cooler. It's a massive cooler you can take around town, and we're entering you to win that. We'll draw the name before we get out of here at about 6 o'clock tonight. So come on by. Smith's on 9th and 9th. Has all your needs for tomorrow's tailgate or backyard party for the Utah-Arizona game. Fresh meat, fresh cheese. They've got a great seafood department, rotisserie chickens, fresh-made products at the bakery, drinks, water, bags of ice. It's all here. No more tickets to the tailgate, but we are giving away this nice cooler, and I'd love to shake your hand and say hello. We're at the Smiths on 9th and 9th here in pretty central Salt Lake City. And before we catch a break, I want to tell you about my friends at Clearwater Distilling. Clearwater Distilling is the only distillery in Utah County open on Sundays. Great spirits. They've got a tasting room, nicest crew around. Limited release Wednesday whiskey batch number 2. That's out right now. A mix of their bourbon and rye whiskeys. They've got their Scandalus, their Renee, or their vodka, which is now in most state liquor stores. Football season is kicked off, and Clearwater is also the official spirits provider for our VIP ESPN 700 tailgate that we have at every home game. Now, do yourself a favor, check out the tailgate or schedule a tour and tasting in their Victorian tasting room. It makes a great date night or a fun activity anytime. Authentic vintage prohibition prescriptions and decor. Try their Scandalus. No sugar, no additives. It's a great tasting grown-up version of cinnamon whiskey. They've got ultra premium spirits. You can buy their spirits in state liquor stores, online, or take a trip to their beautiful distillery. Grab some booze, some local cigars, and immerse yourself in the Clearwater distilling culture. More information can be found online at clearwaterdistilling.com. All right. Coming up on the other side, we will do a little golf. The President's Cup is going on. Now, the international team has stormed back after getting their doors blown off by the U.S. yesterday. And then we'll get back to college football. Chris Camerati is going to be live on site. If you've ever wanted to meet the mysterious and how do I describe CK? I'm going to work on that. If you ever have wanted to meet CK, stop by starting at 4 o'clock. We'll do some college football with Chris. So live at Smith's on a Friday. More coming up next right here on ESPN 700. All right, we're live today at Smith's on 9th and 9th, centrally located here in Salt Lake City, Utah. It is a beautiful day. It's our Smith's Football Fridays. Giving away a nice cooler. It is a Modelo cooler, but sans Modelo, so let's not get weird. There's no beer in it yet. That's up to you. You got to enter to win. We've already given away our tailgate passes. I would love to say hello, like Vincenzo, who just stopped by. Shout out to our guy. So it's Smith's here on 9th and 9th. Come on by and say hello. Chris Comrani will be live on site. If you've ever wanted to meet the mercurial, mysterious Chris Comrani, come by and say hello. Our next guest, you know him, you love him. The Black Desert Championship right around the corner. President's Cup going on. It's never a bad time to talk golf, even on a football Friday. Paul Pugmire, sir, how are you?
I'm doing great, Spencer.
Well, I appreciate the time. So, went to bed last night. Go USA, and then, wow, a massive comeback by the international team today. They took all 4 Friday foursomes after the U.S. took all 5 points yesterday. Where are you at with this crazy event? What do you make of it so far?
Well, the sun rose on a new day, didn't it? And I'm overlooking the 18th green right now at Royal Montreal, where the international team is poised to complete a sweep to match yesterday's sweep by the Americans. Pretty incredible.
Oh, I forgot that you're there. Yes, that's right. Live on site, and I should have remembered at the Royal Montreal Golf Club up there in Montreal. So let's talk a little bit about what happened yesterday, because obviously you're on site. And we'll start with the local angle. Tony Finau, Xander Schauffele were able to get the win, 1-up over Jason Day. Byung-Hun An as well. What stood out most about Tony's win and the matchup that he played and won with Xander Schauffele?
It took a lot of good golf to win that match, and that's exactly what Finau and Schauffele gave him. Finau made 4 birdies, Schauffele made 5, and it took all of them to get the job done. But there was some exquisite shot making going on. It was really something to watch. And Jason Day would match him, and On made some great putts. It was high level golf, exactly what you would hope for in an event like this.
The margin of error with these guys is amazing to me, because you referenced the shot-for-shot match, and I'll tune in, this morning, watch for about 30, 45 minutes before I had to kind of get to work on the rest of my prep, and it's like one good shot, another good shot. I mean, the margin of error, it's so small, which makes it so interesting that we've had these wild swings. But let me ask you about the hullabaloo, I guess involving Scottie Scheffler and Tom Kim. I did not see this live. Scottie Scheffler and Russell Henley won that 3-2, so that lasted 16 holes. Did you see it in person, and what do you make of this storyline between these two that a lot of people seem to be talking about?
Yeah, I was nearby. I was across the fairway, so I saw that there was something going on, and it really. So the situation was that the assistant captain for the internationals, Guillermo Villegas. Just a minute. If you can hear that cheer in back of me, the internationals just walked down the sweep. That's what that cheer has to mean.
My goodness.
So, yeah. It's pretty incredible. An amazing turnaround that I want to talk about in a minute. But first, to answer your question, it really was the assistant captains who got into it, Villegas and Kevin Kisner. Villegas asked his players, Tom Kim especially, to go to the next tee after they hold out rather than waiting for Scheffler to putt. And it's a minor little breach of protocol and tradition, but yeah, I didn't view it as a big deal, but the assistant captains got into it. They got a little chippy with one another, and it actually, I think it's a part of what's pushed the internationals to come firing back today. So there's that.
Well, you love a little drama at these things. I mean, the Ryder Cup certainly was not devoid of drama itself. Let me ask you, let's get to what happened today. And it seems like ultimately, to your point, the international team certainly motivated. And you correct me if I'm wrong, because I still approach this as somebody who's still learning about this sport on the professional level. But it feels like Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele are a duo that's highly thought of, and they got absolutely stomped, 7-6 through 12 holes by Matsuyama and Sung Jae Im. What'd you see, and how surprised were you to see Cantlay and Schauffele off the course after 12 holes?
After 12 holes, that part of it was shocking. I am not surprised to see Matsuyama win this. He is one of the top players in the world, regardless of who you pair him with. With him in the pairing, no, I'm not surprised to see him emerge victorious. But that kind of washout, no, that was shocking. Because Cantlay and Schauffele, as you note, are a team that has a lot of history together, a lot of successful history. They've known each other and played together since they were kids, and they've done really, really well on the world's biggest stages together. But this spank down today that they got was really something, and quite surprising that it was that severe.
So Tony Finau paired with Wyndham Clark today, a pairing you like on paper, but they got worked, Paul. And are Mackenzie Hughes and Corey Connors both Canadian?
They are.
Okay, so do you think that had anything? They didn't have to leave the course after 12, but they had to after 13. I mean, 6 and 5. They got smoked. They got smoked. What'd you see out there?
Yeah, school was in session,
Yeah.
and Connors and McKenzie were teaching. What I saw there in this match is what I saw throughout all the matches and walking around the course today and talking to several people, including Ellie Day, Jason Day's wife. I got to talk to her for a few minutes. There was a different energy all throughout the whole international squad. Last night Mike Weir said, look, I expected more noise. I expected more energy from the crowds. And that was all over TV last night. People heard it. They showed up making noise, and it's made a difference. It really has.
All right, you brought up Mike Weir, Canada's Mike Weir. Just kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Just kidding. Draper's Mike Weir. But I didn't know this, Paul, because as you know, I haven't really started watching pro golf a ton until the past 4 or 5 years. What are your memories of Mike Weir beating Tiger Woods at this golf course back in 2007 on a Sunday in a President's Cup?
Boy, I remember it well, and it's so fun to see this golf course and in person and put these holes really in 3D perspective. Weir comes into 17. They're tied. He hits a great shot on 17, and now that I've seen the green complex at Dick Wilson Green Complex, and I realize how hard that shot was. But Weir hit a great shot on 17, makes a birdie, and then he needs to make a solid par on 18 to close out the match, which he does, and he takes down Tiger. It was a seminal moment in President's Cup lore, certainly in Mike Weir's career and in Canadian golf, and it really added to the legend that is Mike Weir in Canada. It's amazing. There are so many Mike Weir fans here. I've gotten to know some of them just walking around, and it's a cool thing. And it's fun to remind them that, hey, we share him with you. He's one of ours as well.
Paul Pugmire's live at the Royal Montreal Golf Club for the President's Cup. You can hear his show coming up tomorrow. We'll let you know what that's going to sound like in just a moment. All right, Paul, so the U.S. takes all 5 for the Thursday 4-ball. The International responds with all 5 with a Friday foursome. So what? Tell me the format tomorrow and what you're most looking forward to and what you'll be looking for to see how the U.S. bounces back.
It's a marathon tomorrow. They've got morning matches and afternoon matches. The challenge for the captains will be to spread out the workload in the right way, and I don't know what that right way is, but they've got to figure that out. And I think we're going to see tomorrow, because it's going to be a 2-match day, potentially a 36-hole day. Look and see what happens on the back 9 on the second matches when people are getting tired and spent. Half of the team, a little more than half of the team, is going to have to play 36 holes tomorrow. It will be really interesting, and then they will set up the Sunday singles matches when everybody goes play.
So, based off of what you've seen and based off of your knowledge of the course, which team is more equipped to handle the challenges that the golf club poses, if that makes sense? Give me your thoughts on that.
Sure. Royal Montreal is an old-school parkland course. It's one of Dick Wilson's gems. Dick Wilson is the architect responsible for developing the air game in modern golf with his use of hazards and obstacles that make you carry the ball all the way to the green, and he is responsible for elevated greens, which are predominant here at Royal Montreal. What that means is it's an iron game. Look for players who have the best iron play to emerge victorious. And obviously that starts with Scotty Scheffler and Xander Schauffele, but it includes Jason Day. It includes Adam Scott. There are players on both of these teams that are top iron players in the world. Look for the second shots to determine who wins tomorrow.
So who on the U.S. side has looked in the best form? And then on the international side, I guess the answer is Hideki after what he did today. But who's – and you can give me a couple of names. Obviously, golf is like any other sport, momentum, confidence, who's playing well when the chips are on the table. So as we move forward into the weekend now, who looks the best on both sides, Paul, from your eye?
What a great question. Man, after yesterday, I would have said Xander Schauffele. He hit some of the best iron shots I've seen in a long, long time yesterday. But then today he got put down. I just have to go back to you have to keep your eye on Schauffele, and you have to keep your eye on Scheffler. They're just too good of iron players over too long a time. And but another one of the American players who's really been playing well is Russell Henley, and he's been paired with Scheffler. It'll be interesting to see if Captain Jim Furyk keeps those two together. They've been a good pairing, and Scheffler seems to like it. Russell Henley doesn't get a lot of press on his own, but he is a rock-solid player. On the international side, you're right to call out Hideki Matsuyama. I would keep your eye on the Canadians, in particular Corey Connors and Mackenzie Hughes. Hughes doesn't get a lot of attention, but his analytics are very strong. There's a reason he was a captain's pick. I think Mackenzie Hughes is going to make some noise.
All right. You and I spoke about some of the selections and the process, and you agreed with some, you disagreed about others. Any of the questionable selections proving you to be right or wrong so far, Paul? And if so, give me some names of golfers you think should be in the shoes of the ones that aren't playing that well so far.
It's interesting that you asked that. I was thinking this afternoon as everything was falling apart for the Americans, wondering to myself if Jim Furyk had any second thoughts about not having Justin Thomas on this team. I don't know. I'm not in his shoes. But I can say again, if things are starting to go south, I want Justin Thomas in that locker room. I want that generational talent on my roster sheet the next day. I don't know. Max Homa, I love the guy. I think he's fantastic. But I don't see that Homa's brought very much, and I think they've got to be missing Justin Thomas.
All right, Paul, before I let you get back to it, we are just inching closer and closer to a really big deal for people who love golf and love sports in Utah, as the Black Desert Championship is right around the corner. It's a few weeks away, October 9th through the 13th at the Black Desert Resort. It is the return of the PGA Tour to Utah for the first time in more than 60 years. Tickets available at blackdesertevents.com. I know I have Google, but I like your information better. So you just tell me, are we inching closer and closer to understanding who we are going to go see down there? Because I know a lot of people just want to go because it's a PGA event for sure, and it's a beautiful track, and it's going to be great weather in St. George, as us Utahns know about. But I know there are a lot of people that are waiting to see, like, okay, who exactly am I going to pay to go see? Are we getting closer and closer to understanding what that list is going to look like?
Yeah, we are. We won't know for sure until the Friday prior to the week of the tournament. So Friday prior to the Monday qualifier. Yeah, that's just the way PGA Tour event registrations work among the people who have the ability to register, right? So we won't know for sure till then, but we are starting to know a little more. Last week, the tournament announced that all of the assistant captains on the U.S. team, Kisner, Sink, they'll all be here. They're going to play at Black Desert. That's going to be awfully fun to see them. We already know that Mike Weir is going to be playing in it. And, of course, A few of our other Utah players, Zach Blair and Patrick Fishburne. We know that Kihei Keenan, 18-year-old high school kid, got an invitation. I can't wait to see how he does on that stage. But we won't know until Friday, prior to the tournament.
Go tomorrow. I'm sure a lot of people excited to hear it live from Montreal.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of President's Cup. We will be live from Royal Montreal. We also will be talking with Coach Garrett Clegg from the University of Utah. They just got their second win in a row, Utah Golf. First time in school history that the Utes have won 2 tournaments in a row. And we're going to be doing some more things to tee up the Black Desert. Lots going on.
All right, my friend. Well, I am jealous, but I'll just choose to be happy for you as opposed to anything else. So enjoy the weekend, and we'll check in soon. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Spencer.
All right, Paul Pugmire, live on site, man. What a cool experience. President's Cup, I don't know that it has like the cachet of the Ryder's Cup, and I haven't watched a ton. I mean, obviously we're focused on some other things, but it looks really cool. Team USA swept the Thursday 4-ball, and the international team just swept the Friday foursome. So we enter Saturday's competition deadlocked at 5, and first to 15.5 wins the President's Cup. All right, as I referenced, Black Desert Championship right around the corner, October the 9th through the 13th at Black Desert Resort in St. George, Utah. Black Desert Championship marks the return to the PGA Tour to Utah for the first time in more than 60 years. Tickets are available at blackdesertevents.com. Now we're live at Smith's today. It's Smith's Football Fridays, and ultimately we're here at the 9th location, which is pretty centralized. So if you're in Salt Lake, I'm probably within 10 minutes of where you're at right now. Giving away a Modelo cooler, sans the beer, okay? So that's up to you, but it's a really nice cooler. Entering people to win. We'll draw a name before we get out of here, coming up at about 6 o'clock. It has everything you need for your tailgate or your backyard party for the Arizona-Utah game, fresh meat. They got a bunch of great deals. I went inside, did a little shopping myself. Fresh cheese, seafood, rotisserie chicken, fresh-made products at the bakery, drinks, water, bags of ice. It's all here. So come on by and say what's up at the Smiths for our Smiths Football Friday here at the Smiths on 9th and 9th. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. We have 2 hours of mostly college football, little NFL to get you ready for a football weekend ahead. Happy Friday to you. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. We're live at Smith's today on 9th and 9th. It's our Smith's Football Fridays. Come on by and say hello. We're giving away a cooler. It's a Modelo cooler, sans the Modelo. So there's no beer in it. That's going to be up to you. But we are giving away the cooler. You just have to enter to win. Tanner will take your information. And we're going to give that away coming up at about 6 o'clock. Smith's has all you need for tomorrow's tailgate or backyard party. Arizona is in town to take on the Utes. Look at Chris Kamrani live on site. CK, thanks for coming down, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well. And, obviously a fun time of year with a lot going on. What's the latest with you? I know you have some projects that are in the cooker you can't talk about.
Correct.
But what can you talk about on the show?
I can talk about pretty much anything else.
Okay.
We can talk about Cam Rising's middle finger / ring finger.
And we will.
We can talk about does BYU have what it takes to win down in Waco?
And we will.
We can talk about the late season crises that RSL finds itself in.
We'll touch on that.
And we can talk about listen, man, I'm not watching any good TV, so I don't know if you got any recs, let me know.
Okay. Hacks?
Oh
HBO?
yeah. No, that's. I'm talking about we're up on that. We're up on that. I'm just saying new stuff.
No, but here's the problem.
Yeah.
That is new stuff to me.
Okay.
I'm behind.
Yeah.
You're the one that has to inform me.
You're right. Okay.
Okay. So let's knock those down one at a time. So we'll start with Utah football.
Okay.
They go to Stillwater and get a win. Nobody wins there. Mike Gundy does not lose at home. But it seems like we're kind of in the same situation of playing the guessing game with the quarterback spot. I'm going to operate off the assumption that it's Isaac until it's not. And it feels like a lot of people around here are kind of sick of that talking point because it was the same talking point a year ago. I don't have any other information, Chris, other than Cam is hurt, and when he's ready, he will play. Right? So, but where are you at with this entire thing? Because it feels very reminiscent of last year.
Well, I don't follow such things. Has the line moved at all in the last 24 hours?
It has. So it peaked at 12, and now it's 9.
Oh, okay. There's your answer.
I think so.
I will say that if you're the Utah football staff, you feel empowered to roll with the status quo that got you a win in a place that is historically very difficult to win. But I will always argue the flip side of it in that you are going to be presumably rolling with a true freshman quarterback who is going to have to learn to take his licks in real time when they come. We saw Isaac struggle a little bit the first couple weeks, not so bad the last couple weeks. But again, we're talking about a team that's coming in with maybe the best quarterback wide receiver duo in the country. Like if you're talking about guys who are attached to the hip or have the telepathy together, you can make an argument that Fafita and McMillan have that. These are two guys that decided to stay at Arizona together for a reason. They could have bolted and followed Jed Fish to Washington. So you have the bye week after this game. It's a big game. It's homecoming. It's the night game. I know Utah fans love the blackout game. They have since it started in 08 or whatever. But I will proceed cautiously because you are talking about a true freshman quarterback who eventually will have a coming down to earth. You just will, because that's the nature of football. And I'm not saying I want it to happen for him. I'm just saying proceed cautiously.
Is it fair to say that to your point, while he has looked better week to week, which is all you can ask for, right, from a team or a player just to continue to improve, I think it's probably fair to say they haven't won because of anything he's done individually. So is it fair to say that even if they have decided to go with, until Cam's right, an 18-year-old who just enrolled in April, that probably means they're fine with letting him take step-by-step progress and playing great defense and running the football, which is kind of what Kyle wants to do.
Yeah, both things can be true. One is that Isaac, if he can put more zip on the ball, he can give you a better chance to win any college football. You're not going to put out a quarterback who cannot throw a deep pass hard, cannot put velocity on the ball. But at the same time, if we want to be nitpicky, which I think we can, you're looking back at last week, you won a tough, odd game in which Isaac turned the ball over twice. Mike Gundy had a very odd decision to remove his very seasoned seventh-year starting quarterback, which did not go well. And as soon as he put him back in the game, then OK State made a run at it. So at the end of the day, they got the W, which is all that matters. But at the same time, you have to look at every game and dissect it because of what happened. And what happened is Isaac played a good game. I would say Isaac played a decent game.
Mm-hmm.
You can't turn the ball over twice on the road, especially, Kyle does not like losing the turnover battle. I'm sure he said this week that historically you don't win when you go on the road and lose the turnover battle 3-1 or 3-2, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think you can afford to do that going forward with the rest of the teams that Utah plays, even against Arizona.
Yeah. So the SEC this season has decided to adapt the pro model of reporting injuries. And so, if you play fantasy football, if you pay attention to football, on like Thursday or Friday, pro teams submit their injury report, and you find out who's in, find out who's out, find out who's at game time. SEC is now doing the same. And simply, Chris, because of the bottom line of who your starting quarterback is worth hundreds of millions of dollars on the betting market. At some point, college football will lean into this entirely. Until they do, Kyle's job is not to tell us who's starting a quarterback. I know fans get frustrated, and there's some certain media members that believe they're entitled to that information. We're not. Kyle's job is to win games.
And Kyle doesn't care. I hate to break it to
Kyle
everyone.
doesn't give a rip. And by the way, there is a legitimate debate to be made that there is a competitive advantage. Now, that has been dispelled by others, namely Jim Harbaugh, who was always very open and honest about who's playing, who's not. He's like, that's such an overrated thing to think that you have a competitive advantage because you kept an injury from the public. But if Kyle thinks that's an advantage, he's going to use it. But what do you make of this communication structure that seems to continue to frustrate a lot of you football fans?
Well, I guess I would look at it through like the prism of how Mike Gundy explained it last week. I think Mike Gundy in his Monday or Tuesday press conference said they were expecting Isaac to play. He said that before anybody, even before the lines fluctuated. Football guys aren't dumb. They know that if a quarterback suffered a severe cut or whatever on his throwing hand, he's probably not going to play. Like, I understand the way Kyle thinks, because I do agree, like, why do it if you don't have to? And I do know that Kyle, when push comes to shove, when he's eventually forced to, he will, and he won't complain about it.
Yep.
But until then, you don't have to do it. And the reality is Utah finds itself with a starting quarterback who has reached cult-level status here for a myriad of reasons, but he's also a guy that gets hurt too often, and he's a guy that throws game plans into flux, and it's something that you just have to roll with. It's just the reality of the situation. And I think the last person in the world, I know for a fact, because he told me, the last person in the world who wants to be dealing with will you play or will you not play is Cam Rising. But here we are again. Utah is just better equipped to handle that lack of Cam this year than they were last year.
Well, and you spent time with him recently for your piece for The
Yeah.
Athletic. So let's dig into that a little bit more, because it's one thing to hear a soundbite on a radio show or a soundbite or a social media post or whatever. When you sat with him and you talked about this process that he's gone through, what stood out most to you in person with Cam?
Just that, like, a very jovial person who has a very sunny disposition admitted to going through some dark days of having to be the bearer of bad news to people who did not want to hear the bad news. I mean, he told me, like, he stayed in for a long time. He didn't want to even go to the grocery store, go out and get food. Said the DoorDash bill went up.
Yeah.
Like, that is an anecdote in of itself that shows that he is one of the most recognizable people around town. And I understand, like, fame isn't for everybody. And
Right.
Cam said it himself. Like, he's just a guy that wants to be a quarterback. And the reality is, unfortunately, that comes with the territory of playing the most important position in sports. But to me, it was the fact that I think unrealistic expectations were put onto his potential availability last year, which wraps into something that we talked about ad nauseum last fall. And I think you and I were of the opinion, even in June and July last year, that Cam was probably not going to play at all, let alone against Florida in the opener. And it wasn't until, I think, October that Cam gave me permission to talk to a surgeon, who then told me the full extent of what he suffered. And he said that on Bill's show as well. Like, Cam's knee didn't just suffer a standard ACL tear. It basically exploded.
Right. Yeah.
Like, everything that keeps his knee together for the basic standards of walking in everyday life, let alone being a mobile quarterback who wants to be able to get out and roll and throw and make people miss, all that stuff went to hell, basically. So he had to figure out a way to continuously be the bearer of bad news to a population that believes in him, has seen him lead them to the promised land of 2 Pac-12 titles, 2 Rose Bowls, and understands that with Cam behind center, they have their best shot of doing big things.
I wonder, because it was clear last year, I don't know how this all came down, but either Cameron was asked or straight encouraged to be part of the ambiguity week to week. And we would hear him say things like, yeah, I'm shooting for this weekend. We'll see. That's the plan. And same thing from the coaching staff, same thing from everybody up there. What sort of toll do you think that took on him when you talked to him about, knowing that he wasn't going to play? Because in retrospect, he knew, and I had an idea. Then I got it verified. Yeah. Then your information about what really happened in the game. We're like, well, of course he wasn't going to play last year, but he was either strongly encouraged or asked to participate in the narrative that he might week in and week out. How do you think that affected him?
Well, so the thing that's tricky about this whole thing was, there were days where Cam felt like he could play. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. Yeah. Is when you're coming back from such a severe injury and you are exceeding some benchmarks, there will be days where you feel like, oh man, like one more good day and maybe I have a shot. And then after 2 good days, Cam would have a bad day. Yeah. And understanding that Cam's aspirations are, part of wanting to go play professional football, Utah and Cam did not want to put him in harm's way if he wasn't feeling like he could potentially be 100%. But the reality is you kind of have to go with status quo, and the status quo at Utah right now is you don't talk about injuries. And it doesn't make sense for your star quarterback to necessarily deviate. Cam deviated a little bit on Bill's show last year, and I think that was kind of when rubber hit the road for him, and understandably so. But here we are again. I think, fortunately for everybody, especially for Cam, like the injury is not close to severe. Like I honestly think that, Cam was pretty close to playing, according to Kyle, until he started warming up, and he just didn't have zip on the ball until last week.
Yeah. You said this earlier. The silver lining is it appears to look better this year for Ute fans when Cam is not available. So is it fair to say that I still think for them to win the Big 12 and do something fun in the CFP, it's got to be Cam. But I also believe that for them to get there, they're going to have to get more from Isaac, whether it's tomorrow or at some point throughout the week. Like, I think we need to put this narrative away that, they were able to Dr. Frankenstein Cam's brain, and now he's going to throw it away and slide.
It's not who he is.
No, it lasted a game and a half, Chris.
Yeah.
And even less than that because they sat him for, basically at the end of the first half at SUU.
Right. Yeah.
So, what should the conversation sound like regarding this situation? Because while I do think they're going to need Cam, I also believe that they're going to need more from Isaac if they want to win the conference.
You can make an argument it's the best and worst case scenario playing out in real time. Mm-hmm. Worst case scenario is Cam got hurt early doing something that he knows that he probably shouldn't have done. He should have just went down and taken the 15-yard sack and move on to the next play. But he didn't, and the reality is we are where we are. The best case scenario is you have a guy who you believe can be the future behind him who is getting reps in real time and is leading you to wins. But again, I can't emphasize this enough. A true freshman leading a top 10 team into a Big 12 schedule that they're playing for the first time is very, very difficult.
For sure it is.
And we have to proceed with the understanding that this kid is a good player. He was highly sought after for a reason, but he will take his licks if he continues to play.
For sure.
I mean, that's just the reality.
For
you can listen to people around here who are saying, like, maybe Isaac is better than Cam. No, he's not. He's not right now. That is not the reality anybody should be living in. Isaac is the future, but he is not the present.
Oh, well said. And, I think he's shown enough to, again, make Ute fans feel a little bit better because last year was Bryson, then it was Nate, then it was Bryson and Nate, and it just never really fully worked. All right. As you know, I don't look at mentions, and I don't do my show based off of one person who sent me a tweet about one thing. And so, you'll hear sports talk radio hosts go like, "Man, I had a take yesterday and I got killed." Then you look like 2 dudes tweeted at you. Okay, calm down. You didn't get killed. And I hesitate to do the same about a truncated space of people who I've spoken with or overheard at golf courses talk about.
Golf courses.
You know what I'm talking.
Okay.
Give me some, CK.
Okay.
Give me some. You know what I'm talking about. No, I'm warming up, hitting warm-up putts because, I get there early, I grind. I'm a worker. Nobody talks about it. You got to
read the breaks.
Nobody talks about my work ethic. I think it's kind of unfortunate.
I think a lot of people know that you have work ethic. But anyways, go ahead.
Fair enough. And as I'm warming up, just hitting some putts, I hear 4 football bros, mid-50s, Ute fans, and they're talking about how much money Cam is making to play for Utah. And I'm sorry, but when money comes into it, it does change things. It just does. Now, I don't think it changes where we're at, and that is he's hurt trying to get back. But, you overhear things like, oh, you're 7 figures to play quarterback in college, and, you last a game and a half. And is there something nefarious going on? Because, of course, it's 2024, and we have to have a conspiracy theory about everything, windmills and such. But in your opinion, how, if at all, does money come into the equation now that Cam reportedly is making 7 figures to play quarterback?
I mean, it played a role in him wanting to come back,
right? As
it should have. I asked his parents that when I talked to him for this story. It's like, if you are the guy in a market that so desperately wants to have a guy, why not go for it? And for a bunch of reasons, it made sense for Cam to come back. It did not make sense for Cam coming off a serious injury to try to go the undrafted free agent route and presumably make way less money, even if he's stuck with a team, than what he could make here. But if people are upset about that, they shouldn't be upset, because you're talking about people investing in people who play football. Mm-hmm. If people are frustrated about that, then I don't know what to tell them. Then they are, I would make an argument, they're a little too thick in the head, because the reality is if you're talking about a athlete at a university who plays football and plays the style of football that Cam does, the chances are he might get hurt. Same way that Mekhi Bernard might get hurt, or Dorian Singer might get hurt. Anybody might get hurt. This is football. This is not golf. No offense to you and reading the breaks and the bros who are also probably trying to read the breaks. This is what people are investing in for a bunch of reasons, because it makes sense to try to retain players. We saw the S hit the fan this week in Vegas, man. Like the starting quarterback of a top 25 team, a program that has been so irrelevant for decades, decided to up and leave after a 3-0 start. That doesn't happen without NIL. Mm-hmm. So if you're upset about that, people, if you're upset that Cam got paid to come back to Utah, I suggest you find a new sport to root for or to watch.
Right, because, and I talked about this the day after the Sluka announcement, I'm not one to say it's good or bad, but it's time to say it's different. And if you're going to consume,
it was inevitable.
For sure, and it should have happened a long time ago. My stance on this is very well documented. If you're going to watch the NBA, you got to deal with load management. If you're going to watch the NFL, you got to deal with CTE or Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. Whatever your thing is.
Or just injuries. I don't understand.
Right.
The only time I get, Eastwood on the lawn, man, is how can you get mad about injuries in a sport where the whole point is to try to dislodge a football going a million miles an hour at somebody else while they're wearing pads and a giant helmet. I don't understand these people.
It's not a contact sport, it's a violent sport, as I've always said. But if you want to consume college football, you're going to have to get used to the fact that what you were programmed to believe about amateurism is now a farce. And it always was.
It always was.
But it's evaporated right in front of you, right? Yeah. And now these people who claim that, and I'm not a college football alarmist, because Saturdays in the fall still feel like Saturdays in the fall. And I think even when the reality sets in where the top 40 or whatever go do their own thing and everyone else is left behind, it's actually in a way going to improve the product, because we'll see a lot of brand matchups week in and week out. But you just have to accept that now the new reality is here, and the alternative you have has always been only one thing, and that's don't watch, and don't tune out. But no part of me believes this sport is in trouble. No part of me, Chris.
No,
I think the future's bright.
It just needs people who are smart to put a set of rules in and deploy them for everybody to follow, whether it's standardizing NIL. I know Charlie Baker had a tweet today saying, I saw this week. I'm upset about it too. Here's where people need to go register. No, man. There needs to be hard and fast rules where if you break the rule, like in years past, you get a severe penalty.
Right.
I mean, SMU, man. I mean, I did a story earlier this year with Brian Hamilton, who's a colleague of mine, who's a great college football or college basketball writer. We wrote about how once upon a time, car dealerships were the bane of college athletics. People were terrified of them. And now they're playing a role in landing players, because that's the way things go.
Right. And the irony is UNLV, when nothing was legal, was paying everybody. Right? And honestly, not even apologizing for it. Like LJ, Greg Anthony, those guys were driving. Stacey Ogman, Anderson Hunt.
Okay.
Right? We can keep going if you want. That team, which was one of the greatest college basketball teams I've ever seen play, those guys were driving nice cars in Vegas. And now that it's legal, they can't seem to figure it out. And I guess the lesson, if you're a young person, is you have to get it in writing. Verbal promises are simply your word against the other person's.
Get it in writing and have representation pour over every piece of fine print.
Right.
And just know what you're signing up for.
Yeah, but definitely get it in writing. All right, we'll do a little BYU coming up next segment because I know that the BYU bros want to hear from CK.
Absolutely.
But we have Colorado now at 3-1.
Yep.
And they're heading to UCF, who I think is a problem. I think I've seen enough.
Hurricane weather, though, Spence.
This is true.
This is the type of weather where if you're going to throw the ball 50 times a game, it doesn't help you out.
Point.
And Colorado is a team that wants to let Shedeur Sanders turn it loose.
And UCF wants to run over you. So, but Colorado had a couple of questions leading into the CSU game. They were able to get that done, and it was a miracle against Baylor. But there were a lot of noise kind of surrounding Deion because Deion being Deion is just going to bring attention no matter what, winning or losing. What's fair to say about Colorado's 3-1 start? And could UCF be that team that no one's really talked about that might derail something special? Utah plays them the last game of the season.
Well, I think you can correct me. You can open up UCF's schedule and who they played so far. I think they barely squeaked by TCU. I think they had to come back and beat TCU.
They smoked New Hampshire.
Yeah. And
Sam Houston.
And poor Sam Houston. But they have a veteran quarterback who played at Arkansas, and they have a really good running back. And listen, this is the type of team that Colorado does not want to face, as you mentioned. The type of team that isn't interested in letting it loose and throwing in the area of Travis Hunter. This is a team that wants to be able to run the ball 30 to 40 times a game. And Gus Malzahn is a great coach. He's won a national championship with Auburn. He knows what he's doing. So I think the fact that Colorado came back and won that game last week against Baylor was great for college football. It was great for them. But I do think this is a tricky matchup because anytime you come up against a team that doesn't want to get into a shootout with you, you're going to be in trouble. And that's where the Buffaloes find themselves this weekend.
Shouldn't Travis Hunter win the Heisman Trophy?
Oh, yeah, easily. But I think
he will?
No.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the voters care too much about positions and optics and stats that have historically been bloated, in my opinion.
I don't know that I've ever seen a college player like him. He's remarkable.
Well, I mean, I don't remember watching Charles Woodson or Dion, but
Woodson's a good one.
I don't think they played. I don't think they produced to the level that Travis does on each side of the ball each week.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. All right, coming up next, more college football. BYU. I had Aaron Roderick on the show a couple of weeks ago, and I said, what's different about this 3-0 start opposed to what happened a year ago? So far, A-Rod has proved to be a little bit prophetic. They are 4-0. What sort of answers do we need to see at Baylor? Brunch in Waco, 10 a.m. With CK before we say goodnight. Get back to some college football in the 5 o'clock hour live today at Smith's Football Fridays here at the Smiths on 9th and 9th. We're giving away a cooler. It's a nice Modelo cooler. No beer in it, but it is a nice cooler. So come by, enter to win, and we'll hook you up before we say goodnight at 6 o'clock. Let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Give him a call, 801-424-DISH. Do not call him. Well, call him. He's not joining us. We'll catch a break. More next on ESPN 700. requests, Dave?
I did not, but I ordered it delivered.
Porter's been in his bag as of late.
What does that mean? Does that mean
come on, you know
so
what
like
the
they're
kids are
reaching in and pulling out money because like they're so money? Like give me the actual metaphor because I don't get it.
According to my dear friend Doris Burke,
Okay.
when a basketball player's in his bag, he's making sweet moves.
Okay.
So Porter in his bag with his music selection, he's going to kill it. How am I educating you on this,
Dude,
this
you
language?
should know better. I mean, you might be like 8 years older than
I'm
me,
a Gen Xer.
but we are on standard playing field when it comes to this Gen Z lingo.
I also have a 23-year-old son.
Does that help you or does it hurt you? Does he tell you?
He
you go.
informs me, and then I awkwardly try to use the word he has told me
you
in
can't
front
do
of
that.
some of his friends,
Can't
and
do that.
he doesn't like it. He says it's cringe. I'm being mid or extra or whatever. Anyway,
No cap is the one that I still don't understand.
so that means no lie.
No lie.
Yeah,
Okay.
no cap is no lie. And the reason no cap is no lie is once upon a time online,
Okay.
if somebody thought you were lying, they
Where-
would put a cap on you. So if you'd see somebody wearing
Like a cap emoji, or they
yes,
would
like a
actually
cap emoji.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
and so that was twisted by these youngs.
They
to
wouldn't
say,
Photoshop a hat.
No,
onto
it was
somebody?
like
okay.
I
okay.
think.
Okay, I'm here.
And so now it's turned
I'm with
into
you.
no cap, meaning no lie.
Oh wow.
You know what the Riz is, right?
I do not.
That's charisma.
Okay.
You got the Riz.
Okay.
You got the Riz.
Do I?
You do. You
That's because I got this jersey.
You got the Vancouver Grizzly Antonio Daniels jersey.
Where'd I get
on
this jersey?
That you won from me in a bet that was very impressive. When we were recording a podcast a few years back, when we all thought we were dying, I asked you. I said that
You said name teams that Antonio Daniels played for. And
I think I
you
asked
said
who
other.
drafted him.
Okay.
I think you
Okay.
nailed it. It was even more impressive than I think I said something like, "I'll give you $1,000 right now if you tell me who drafted Antonio Daniels." And without even pausing, you're like, "Vancouver." I was like, "Oh my gosh." So you were kind enough to say, if you don't have to pay me the grand, but buy me a jersey, which is what I did.
get compliments on this jersey. I want you to know that.
And
I'm not a jersey guy.
Yeah.
Like this fits great.
It does.
It is. I think I would argue, in my opinion, one of the coolest jerseys in the history of the NBA.
And a very underrated city that really
Oh,
I
the
hated
best.
having pro basketball. I was only up there 4 or 5 times, but I always loved it. I had to dig deep to find that Antonio Daniels.
Was this an eBay?
It was an eBay.
Okay.
But
I'm glad that
eBay.
eBay's still a thing too.
Well, I'm glad I didn't have to pay a GUR, and I just had to spend $100 on a jersey. But that was the origin story. As Chris Camerani is live on site, just so you know, it is Smith's Football Fridays here at Smith's on 9th and 9th. Come on by and say hi. We'd love to meet you. You can actually see Chris Camerani in person, which is very rare. It's like seeing a wild creature out, hanging out.
Like
He's
a
usually-
white tiger. But
well done. No, don't do that. Not this week. I don't need it. So CK live on site for one more big segment here. All right, we did Utah football last segment. The Utes obviously welcome in Arizona. 8:15 is your kick time at Rice Eccles. The AccuWeather temperature is 72 degrees and clear. Tomorrow night's going to be a lot of fun. Hope to see you up there.
are you going?
Yeah, I'll be up there. My son's in town,
Okay.
so we're going to go to see a Ute game because I don't get to see him very much anymore because he's living back east. But, I felt like BYU was better than people were giving them credit for. Media picks them 13th in the preseason. Vegas over-under was 4.5. But I picked them to win 6 games. I did not think we'd sit here talking about a 4-0 BYU team. Defense feels real. So before we get into the particulars, overall, 4-0, where are you at with BYU right now?
Overall, it sounds super cliche, but BYU ceiling is as far as Jake Retzloff can take them. Kudos to Kalani and Jay for building a very impressive defense, something that I think you could make an argument was the Achilles heel of the program, ironically,
Which
in
was
recent
odd,
years.
yeah.
Kalani being a defensive guy, but the fact that BYU for so many years in a row had future pros at quarterback and always were able to recruit skill position players. The defense struggled, especially against teams that like to run the ball this year. I think you could make the argument that BYU has one of the best linebacker corps in the conference, and when they play, you see that how good those guys can play and how well they can impact the game. But listen, 4-0, I really, really think we can't overreact to the Kansas State game because a night game at LaVell Edwards Stadium is a very difficult place to play.
White out, alternate cougar tail.
Vanilla frosting cougar tail.
And maple if you prefer, but we had both.
I think we'll find out who this team is this week.
For
I think
sure.
Even if they lose a close game, I think you could make an argument that BYU can get to 7 to 8 wins.
Yeah.
If they get blown out, I think that I don't want to say is going to potentially be a forecast of what could come, but listen, they're coming off a high against a team that they destroyed, but was one of the oddest statistical games I think you can say in recent history. I don't know what the time of possession breakdown was indifferent, but BYU didn't have the ball all that much more compared to Kansas State. Am I wrong there?
No, you're correct.
Okay.
I do want to say I'll give the coaches a lot of credit because listening to Kalani's presser after you get through the whole hey, what's your favorite ice cream question? Listening to Jay Hill and Kelly Papinga, A-Rod, all of them. And I don't want to diminish what I think was a really cool night for that program. I don't want to diminish a win. It's the biggest win BYU's ever had over a top 15 team. So
statistically.
Wow. So
Wow.
bottom line, 38-9. I'm a results over vibes guy.
No,
you know me.
Absolutely.
38-9, period. End of story. But as Kalani pointed out, K-State was 8 of 17 on third down. BYU was 3 of 9. K-State hung 367 yards on BYU. BYU had 241 yards of total O. K-State had the ball for 33 minutes. BYU 26-57 thereabouts.
Okay.
K-State had 8 penalties and 3 turnovers. You get a couple of, essentially interceptions in the red zone. Credit A-Rod for calling the kill shot, so you get touchdowns instead of field goals. The flukiest punt return you will ever see, even though it was awesome, a scoop and score. So it was a confluence of great fortune and also skill and good coaching as well. But what do you want to see tomorrow? So the conversation next week might be, okay, they legitimately are better than anyone thought for sure.
Somebody needs to give Parker Kingston some electrolytes before the game.
For sure.
Because our guy was spewing big time. I think he ran 130 yards in total.
I think it was 138 I heard on the broadcast, which is lunacy.
I don't think I've ever seen a player be please don't touch me, because
Right.
you could tell that he felt so horrible because of the amount of exhaustion that he just exerted.
Right.
They need to translate it to the road.
Mm-hmm.
They've played okay on the road. They won a very ugly game at SMU, which a lot of people had high hopes for SMU this year, but turns out they're not that good. They're going back to Texas, an earlier game. I think I heard you say they do not have a good track record in early or day games on the road.
They're 0-10
Okay.
in their last day games versus FBS teams.
Okay.
And
So
they have not won a Big 12 road game yet.
that does not bode well for them.
For sure.
But Baylor's not great.
Right.
They can be taken advantage of on defense. They have some decent skill position players. I've watched them twice with Utah and Colorado now. BYU can absolutely win this game. I just think you have to be able to make what happened Friday night against K-State replicable on the road. And maybe not 38-9, but you have to be able to, like you said, dial up the kill shots, be able to force turnovers, be able to make special teams plays. Those are the types of things that are necessary to do in order to win on the road, no matter who your opponent is.
For sure. And this is kind of the time of year where I start to move from observation to conclusion. We have to talk about what we know about teams now as opposed to what we're trying to learn. Now, it still is early in the season, but we've got 4 weeks behind us. We're a third of the way through, essentially. So let's do this exercise with both BYU and Utah. One thing, Chris, I can say that I feel like I know for sure about BYU is, to your point, that defense is for real. And I was on the sidelines when Baylor was here to play Utah. That offense, it didn't look good. Now, every time I say, hey, the offense didn't look good here in Salt Lake, well, yeah, they played against Utah's defense. So, Baylor almost got Colorado a week ago. How good is Colorado? I'm confident for BYU in this game because one thing I feel like I know I can say as we move from observation to conclusion is the defense is for real. But I'm not ready to say anything about Checketts. I'm not. Over the course of the 4 starts last year, and at times this year has looked better, but the mistakes are still there. The bad throws are still there. The turnovers are still there. And, again, he didn't have to do much against K-State, but it did enough to help them get the win. So I'm going to ask you, what do you know about BYU? What do you still need to learn about them?
LJ Martin's out.
I believe so. That running back room is
that's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard, especially going on the road, because I think role players, as they say in any sport, play better at home for obvious reasons. I don't know who's going to be able to take the pressure off of Jake. Jake's a gambler, man. He's a gunslinger.
Mm-hmm.
But, like Kenny, he's got to know when to hold him and know when to fold him.
For sure.
He has an amazing arm. Like, he can drop down and make throws that a lot of people can't make. Like, he has a tremendous amount of arm strength that a lot of people don't realize he has. But to your point, like, there were some of those throws against SMU where it's like the screenplay where he throws it right to the other guy on his own 10-yard line. It's like, oh no, please no. Like, those need to be eradicated in order for BYU to hit their ceiling. So what do I know about BYU? Great defense, deserve to be 4-0. Will only go as far as Jake can take them, meaning can he produce within A-Rod's system and avoid the type of back-breaking turnovers that would tire out a defense that's very, very good.
I don't want to sound redundant, so I'm not going to just do the same exercise with Utah, but here's what I will ask you, because what we know about Utah is what we know about a team that's coached by Coach Witt, and they, in my opinion, have earned kind of a benefit of the doubt status that very few schools in the country have. Now, college football is weird for a number of reasons, even though we love it. But one of the things that I've always found a little bit puzzling is it does feel like you get brand benefit of the doubt, at times leading people away from actually analyzing who you are, what you brought back, what you added. I'm thinking of USC and Notre Dame more than anything. It feels like every year we're told that, hey, these two, and sometimes they're really good, sometimes they're not, but more often than not, I don't feel like they ever perform to the level of their preseason hype. I'm not saying
So what you're saying is a lot of people nationally are a little lazy when it comes to diving into the realities. Because
100%.
You're right. Because I think I think of Stanford for a long time. It's like when Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw were there. Great defense, run the ball.
Right.
Utah, great defense.
Right. Exactly. So it does feel like Coach Witt has built this thing up to where you just give them the benefit of the doubt. So instead of me doing the exercise of here's what I know about Utah football, what I know about Utah football is what I've known about them for a long time now, and it's how Kyle wants to play. What I'll ask you is what do you still need to see? What questions do you need answered? We know the defense is awesome. We know the O-line's played well. It seems like they might have a bell cow with the way Makai's played so far.
He's been good, but Kyle said it.
Yeah.
Kyle said it.
Yeah.
Anytime, people are frustrated with Kyle. Kyle will tell you what he's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
He said it 2 weeks in a row now. We don't want to maximize touches for Makai because of his potential of getting hurt.
For sure.
Makai's a very good running back, and for a long time we thought he was a third down scat back type person. He's proven that he can be the guy, but it's also being relayed to us by their head coach that they have to figure out a way to not have him get hit so many times and be involved in so many touches. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
Like so many players on this team, he's an older player that has been hurt and gone through various things. That is also the reality of college football. Now, we talked about this before the season even started. Utah's three of its most important players, Cam, Brant, Makai. These are guys that have not played a lot of college football in the last 2 years, which is to the detriment of Utah's hopes. That's just the reality. But to your point, Makai's proven himself, but they have to figure out a way to spell him. Because I don't think last week at OK State is replicable going forward. I don't. I know Mike Mitchell's been banged up, and I know they think highly of him. He's definitely a bigger back who fits the mold of who could play off of Makai's strengths. I get that. But I just don't think Makai being the Zach Moss 20 to 25 carries every single week guy is going to work out for Utah.
Yeah, I said this, I think, on Monday. It's not that I didn't think Makai could run between the tackles. It's just more I don't know that I've seen it the way we saw it against Oklahoma State. So who is the guy? Is it Mike Mitchell? Because he's a little bit banged up. Dejon Stanley had quite a coming out party, but as I talked about against SUU, it was pitch and catch.
Yeah.
There was nobody within 20 yards. And that dude is fast. Nobody was catching him.
Yeah, it was 7-on-7.
Yeah, I believe Cam said after the game that Dejon's the fastest player on the team. I still look at Jalen Glover, and I think, dude, I've seen this kid have big games and big moments for big Utah wins over the past 3 years. I don't know why he can't get off the pine, but obviously something's there. He's fallen out of favor. So if Makai's the guy, but to your point, you can't overuse him, what does it look like? What does the distribution look like?
The pride of East High School, Charlie Vincent.
Sure.
A 6-year guy, a guy who was on the team when I covered the team so long ago. So, Charlie's been on the team.
Okay.
I covered Charlie in high school at the Tribune.
Okay.
That's how credit to Charlie. Charlie was a hell of a skill position player at East. I remember him, a Britton Covey type player, and now he's getting reps at running back for the number 10 Utes. So credit to Charlie. He's played well this year. Clearly, he is ahead of some people in that room for a reason. Andy trusts him, and Kyle trusts him
for sure.
So, what does the room look like behind Mackay? If Mike Mitchell is healthy, it's going to be him. But then after that, it seems like it's a steady dose of Dijon Stanley or Charlie Vincent. I don't pretend to know anything about what's going on with Jalen Glover. That I'll leave that up to Quinton Ganther and Andy Ludwig.
For sure.
But if Utah fans are worried about their fourth or fifth running back right now, that goes to show you how good this team is.
I'm not saying Mackay has reached Cameron level importance, but if Mackay goes down, that's a big blow. I mean, down the stretch, CFP style.
If Mackay goes down and Mike Mitchell is not 100%, who Mike is a talented big young back, but he's not proven. So if you're talking about those two guys being hurt and Cam not being available, it's 5-alarm fire time.
So I posed the question for sure. So I posed the question to Scott Mitchell a couple of weeks ago when we kind of were operating off the assumption that Isaac was getting the start. Cameron's safety valve is clearly Brand. They played together forever, right? And that's going to be the comfort target he looks towards. And for Isaac Wilson, is it becoming Dorian Singer? We finally saw the Dorian game most U fans were hoping for last week. Do you think we're seeing something emerging with Isaac Wilson, Dorian Singer?
It should.
Now?
He's their best wide receiver since Darren Carrington.
Yeah.
If you're talking about pure skill, if you're talking about a number one receiver at Utah who would be a potential number one at other contending schools, which Utah has really never had, yes, he is that guy.
Yeah. So let's move over to the defense here real quick, because one of the conversations I always have every year, Utah, they always just have they have multiple guys on defense that make plays. Multiple dudes. Yeah, they got dudes. You have to say they got.
Okay.
If you want to be a true college football bro, it's they got dudes.
Riz.
Yeah, the Riz, nice, good memory. But year in and year out, go back to Weddle, Clark, Devin, there's like one guy that seems to make all these crazy game-changing plays on defense. Is it time to say it might be Van Fillinger this year?
Yeah.
He's been
good.
Impossible for O-lines to deal with.
Yeah, he's been good. It's been a while since Utah's had a star defensive end like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Bradley and I was the last one that really comes to mind. And for a long time, they had those guys. They were putting guys like that in the league. Hunter Dimmick, Nate Orchard,
the mayor.
Yep. Bradley, some other folks that have come through here and really made a big impact. But I think if I'm looking at the Utah defense, like if Lander Barton has to stay healthy because he's a future like potential day 2 draft pick. I'm not going to say day 1 because that's first round now.
Mm-hmm.
If he stays healthy, they should be in good shape because their defensive line is good again. For a long time, I was of the opinion that Utah's defensive line was not as good as it usually was.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that had to do with health. Obviously, Van is a guy that's been dealing with injuries for a couple of seasons now, last year primarily. But if I'm looking at one guy on the defense that needs to kind of be the stereotypical game-changing player, I'll be stereotypical and say it has to be their best middle linebacker.
Yeah, that's fair. And obviously, we have no word, at least I don't, on Karene Reed's availability this weekend, nor have I heard anything about Connor O'Toole. But Coach Witt, Pac-12, Big 12 Media Days, told us that he thinks the D-line is his deepest spot. So we'll see what happens. All right, CK, before we catch a break, fall means football, but it also means playoff soccer. Right? Football, yes, indeed. Little kicking. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen the SNL skit. Nate Bargatze. It's a little, George Washington, little kicking. RSL, we had Dunny on earlier. Let's do a little RSL for a few minutes before I set you loose. I don't know what they're going to do in goal. Ultimately, it felt like at one point there was a little bit of momentum. Like maybe before the window, do we look at a keeper? I know they love Gavin. He's 18. That's insane. Zach has played well in spurts for them over the past few years, but I think it's safe to say, and Dunny alluded to this, there's no great answer right now in goal. I also don't want to completely pin the defensive issues only on the keeper. It's a team thing. 9 goals allowed in the last 3 games. So we'll get to the attack portion, but what do you attribute most to what I perceive to be a pretty leaky defense with 4 matches left?
Well, 2 of those are at home. And you shouldn't be giving up that many goals at home.
Set pieces, costly goals too.
Dunny's right. There is no right answer right now. Both Zach and Gavin are making game-changing mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily for Gavin, the one against Dallas, he got off the hook a little bit when Jesus Ferreira played that quick free kick, which was brilliant. I've never seen that done in a game.
If I was playing FIFA, I would have turned the Xbox off.
That's like RB, perfect placement.
Yes.
It hit the post and bounced in.
It did.
Unfortunate for Gavin. Historically, RSL has always been the benefactor of amazing goalkeeper play. If we're looking at the landscape of the history of the franchise, Scott Garlick, DJ Countess.
Wow. Kyle Rainish. You don't want to play this game with me, just so you know.
Jeff Antonella.
Nice.
No, I'm being honest. For however many, I can't remember how many years Nick was here, but
Chad Sackett. You will not beat a Chad Sackett reference.
Yeah, I don't even know who that is.
Okay. Blitz.
People hated playing RSL because they had Nick Raimondo.
Sure.
In the regular season and in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And that's not even including penalties. Mm. You're kind of seeing what life is like without a Nick Raimondo. Yeah. And I'm not saying that Gavin and Zach need to be measured up to the stature and the plaudits of Nick Raimondo, but fans are spoiled because of the guy that they had in the pipes. So I'm of the opinion they should have gone out and found somebody because Zach's not it. I think you have to ride with Gavin. He's thought of highly in the youth national team scene. He's a guy that's in those circles already, so he is a good young keeper. You have to ride with him. I think it makes sense. The mistakes he's making aren't any worse than the mistakes that Zach was making.
For sure. Oh, for sure.
So if we're talking about hedging bets, you want to invest more time and potential learning lessons in the kid who has a higher ceiling than the veteran who's been around the league for a long time.
So let's expand the conversation to this, though, because I had to learn this, right? Because early on, because I never watched soccer, I've told you this. And so my untrained eye, and not like I'm some savant now, but you'd see a goal, you'd be like, oh, that's on the keeper, that's on the keeper. Or you'd see a goal, you're like, oh, the center back slipped or whatever. And it was Dunny who kind of taught me, look, center backs, back four, keepers, your mistakes are so punitive because goals change games. Somebody told me that. Goals change games. And so I try to look at it from more of a macro standpoint. Are there bad giveaways? Is the midfield not in possession? Are people not tracking back? But you've been watching this sport a lot longer than I have. If we move away from keeper issues, which are real, what are the other elements that have allowed this defense to take such a nosedive?
Outside back play has been really, really shoddy this year. Andrew Brody has taken a dip. I think I'm of the opinion that Pablo needs to find a way to get Bodie Hidalgo more minutes. I think he has a higher ceiling at any number of positions on the back line. Fruit Heights zone.
Okay.
But to your point, I will say that there are times this year where we're seeing mistakes made by goalkeepers that make me gasp.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen often.
Correct.
By both of these guys.
I'm with you.
Which is the problem.
Yeah.
There are times, Spence, where we're talking about not SportsCenter, not top 10 plays type mistakes.
Yes.
Which can't happen.
Little league soccer stuff.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which can't happen for a number of reasons on a professional level, let alone for a team that's vying for a top 4 playoff spot out west. I think we were lazy in trying to understand. We were lazy in trying.
Talk about this.
Yeah, we were lazy in trying to understand the balance of this team earlier on in the season because they were so amazing offensively.
For sure.
They were winning games 5-3, 4-2. So the fact that their offensive display was so tantalizing. You're always going to fall in love with the shiny object. And for a long time, RSL's shiny object was Chicho Arango, Andres Gomez, and Diego Luna just basically blitzing people and playing amazing soccer and scoring amazing goals. But things have changed, obviously. The front office made a big decision, which I still think is the right decision. But you're seeing a team that basically is trying to figure itself out again on the fly in real time in what is the hardest part of the MLS calendar, the dog days of summer in MLS.
All right, before I set you loose, just to follow up, 4 matches left. I asked Garth, and maybe Garth would just give me a lip service, because Atlanta was in town. We had Garth on. RSL smoked Atlanta pretty good. I said, do you think they can win it? And he said, I do.
Before Andres was sold.
Correct. And so now we move into this new reality, and I know you're a big fan of talking sports, 5 questions with Spence.
5 questions with Spence. Absolutely.
I know
I'm
you're
there.
a huge fan.
I'm there.
And Dave, your guy, Dave Fox, my guy, all of our guys, he asked me,
2 Emmys.
Indeed, 2 Pelotons as well. Are you more confident in RSL making a deep run today than you were a couple months ago? And I said, no, I'm not. So do you think they can win it?
No,
That's before I
they
say
can't.
you don't.
They can't win it.
Okay.
No, the LA teams are too good.
Okay.
Teams that are always tough to play in the postseason, like Seattle and Colorado, are right. They're nipping on their heels. So many things have to go right for them in the last month of the season. They have to figure out a way to get Chicho Arango out of his head and playing at the MVP level that he was. They have to figure out a way for Diogo Gonçalves to be the guy that they spent $4 million on or $3 million on, whatever it was. And they have to figure out a way to stop being a sieve on the back line because they are tremendously bad right now on the back line.
If they have a home playoff game, what do we have to do to get a convoy to head out? Like, let's get a group of like 8 to 10 of us.
Oh, I'll go on tracks with you guys.
Will you?
Absolutely.
Okay, buddy. Good to see you. The great Chris Comrade from The Athletic. He is on Twitter, but he never tweets. He does tweet out his work because he's a great writer. At Chris Comrade is where you find him. All right, 1 hour down.